Everyone, sure.
Yeah, that's a great spot.
That's a good spot. Audio is kind of shit, but
getting started. Naturally, great issues every time. Three main issues I feel that I know myself. All right, so
better.
Well, this is pretty much the street. You know, this has nothing to do with it. You're fine. It doesn't matter. You don't need like. So this is something. All right.
Wait.
Now, popcorn. Thank you for getting us a venue. Absolutely fantastic. And then limited security, thank you for sending money back to price. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the history of what this stupid thing is. I did it a lot in 2018, and I'm wearing this shirt. And crypto shit show for a long time, and then projects went since years. They didn't want to fly people to an event called the crypto shit show, so I had to change the name. So I changed the name to the Untitled Show. This was a horrible move because it sounded like it seemed like I was saying that the case being that it forces humans to behave with integrity that they think is what we have. So good job, Nick. So I did this for a long time. The crypto shit shows were always very small. Target audience size would be about 6. This was really good. Weren't intimidated to ask questions. There's plenty of times people have a lot of networking one-on-ones and stuff like that. And I always did them on Wednesdays during the daytime. This is the Wednesday, I understand. But historically, I always did them on Wednesdays because I didn't want a lot of people because I was dead broke and trying to do this cheap. And if I showed up, I fucking take off work. If it's take off work, you're working in the industry. And it was a choice course. I was force feeding everybody security information. I personally believe that there's this hyper focus on offset in the cryptocurrency space, blockchain space, and everybody focuses on it so much that they then think about security with this Dunning-Kruger approach, where they don't understand threat hunting or application security or a lot of other things. Just be like, hey, if I call red tag, I'm fucking smart. And that's just so Trojan horse. Anyway, so I did this thing all through 2018. Cameras right there. We're getting to the back for sure. And it was a lot of fun. We got to showcase a lot of brand new security research that we've done. Where the security research was done in San Diego in November by Manfred, who was previously a very famous virtual currency hacker and MMORPGs. Good friend, great supporter. I love that fucking guy. We have a lot of consultants. I think we had people from security evaluators, speakers from the IoT village, from the blockchain village. Those are some conferences. So these events, while small, terribly small, doesn't. They've always been a lessons worth it. I want these shows to be very small, high quality attendee. I want this to be Sting, Slayer, and a basic concert event to be that. Yeah. That's what I want out of these things. So when I did the very first one, it was because I went to Consensus, 2017 or 2018. And it infuriated me, and it enraged me, and it was disgusting, and it was neon, and it was cruel, it was shallow, and bad, and awful. It went Aston Martins out in the fucking bay of, or the harbor of New York. And it was awful. I was like, I'm going to do a better show. I'm going to do a higher quality show. I'm going to do it on a $3,000 budget. Every single show I did is done on a $3,000 budget. Venue, flights, and telecommunications. And oftentimes I come out and talk to people. So anyway, that's me a little bit. This event today, I just kind of nominated myself for it. I wrote this $2.5 million now, and I don't have. We're going to talk about it. Talk about security, talk about building. So I think I've spoken long enough for everyone to know what they have to do with the way and all that fun stuff. Now, I'm going to bring up our first speaker today, which is going to be Frank Trezza. Frank Trezza is a security researcher and analyst from Nft Security. Thank you very much. I'll do it from up here. Can you activate? Yeah. That's probably going to be a knob. It's going to be a knob down there, probably.
It's
alrighty.
Here, I got it. Thanks.
Coming closer to the knob.
Turn the volume up. Ah, there's two of me. That's scary.
So by saying that I use these, I can show you all that good stuff. That pretty much underpins a lot of what I do. I volunteer in Washington Village. I've done about half for several years. This past year, last summer, I with one volunteers had a group. It was very computer.com. Overall, I had a great time. Looking forward to doing it again next year. But it's very difficult. I don't think we're really getting the traction that we want to be getting in Washington. So that's really good side. But so I'll just keep bringing up negative stuff until Frank's ready.
I'm ready. Hand me a mic when you're ready. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
All righty. Hi, everybody. How you doing today? Ha! I'm glad I could reach you because I've been trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty. It's expired. Just teasing. So my name is Frank Trezza. I work in information security. I've had many titles over the years. My most recent is security engineer. I work at a company called Luminant. They are a company that does the security for other companies. And today I want to be talking to you guys. Today I want to talk to you guys breathe about operational security. And this is actually the first time I've ever given a talk. So I do apologize for my nervousness, my fast-paced speech, and my heavy breathing. That's mostly because I'm fat.
Thank you.
So, excellent. So, title of my talk is Beyond OPSEC, Securing Your Digital Life. Are my slides working for you guys? Can you see them? All right, it's a little small, so I don't like to read off the slides, but today I'm going to be talking about operational security. This is a term that we in the information security industry have borrowed from the military. It's kind of a shorthand for like identifying, analyzing, controlling information. So it's making sure that the information you let go about yourself doesn't get into the wrong hands or put in a place where it can be used against you. Thank you. How it all works. The military has this way they do OPSEC, and I think information security companies try to base it off of that, but it's a little different with them. But in your own life, you don't need to worry about the official definitions or how things are done that way. You just need to be a little bit more secure so that bad things don't happen to you. Bad things are happening to a lot of people right now because they weren't careful. It's not always their fault. Sometimes they are tricked and they lose money, perhaps like through ransomware attacks, or somebody steals their cryptocurrency. And a recent attack I know of, a friend of mine told me that somebody cloned their Telegram account and went around reaching out to their contacts, asking for money, claiming to be her. And she's big in the crypto scene. So guess what? People sent money. She's like, it wasn't her account. They did a little hacker trick where it's called using puny code, where you can change the characters so they look just like a real A, but it's like a Cyrillic A. And people fell for it because, who wouldn't, right? It looks just like your friend's account, same profile picture. They're asking for money. So you got to be careful. I usually reserve questions to the end of the talk, but go ahead.
It was just an alt code they used?
Yeah.
So it essentially had the same character?
Correct. There used to be an issue with that with registering domains, where people would try and do that with popular domains using alt codes or puny code, or it's just the alternate character sets.
You mind speaking more to the microphone?
Thanks. I do appreciate the feedback. I've never given a talk before. All righty. So some of the basics here. Don't use the same password everywhere. A lot of people do that, and it's usually covered in OPSEC talk, so I just wanted to cover that in the beginning because I wanted to go into some more advanced stuff. Also, for each site that you have a password, you should be using a password management software like LastPass, and there's also free alternatives available. You should be generating unique passwords for all of your sites so that people are not able to find a password that is leaked online from a site you use that has been hacked. For example, in your community, the site Local Bitcoin, it's been hacked 4 times now, and each time they got the hashes, the usernames and hashes of those users, which can easily be decrypted into the passwords, right? So when those passwords are available, there are sites like dhash.com where you can buy access and get copies of people's passwords as a bad actor. So you have to be careful. You should be using 2-factor authentication everywhere that you can. It is free with Google Authenticator on your phone, and many major sites such as Gmail support it now. You should also not be using SMS at all as a second factor for anything. Facebook, YouTube, doesn't matter what site, how important it is, don't use the SMS because SMS can be intercepted. And my friend Lucky has done a lot of research into this. There's actually a site where you can, as a business, go and send mass marketing SMS messages, but they would not verify that the numbers that you give them are actually owned by you. So you could sign up for an account for somebody whose passwords are stuff you want, and then act like, pay the $5 a month. And then when somebody sends that person an SMS, you get a copy of it, right? Because the industry has all the stuff all linked up. You don't even know it happened. It's a lot less complicated than that SIM-jacking attack where they actually have to go to a store and convince an employee to clone your card. It happens a lot now, and you have to be careful because if you are using SMS as a second factor, you're going to have a bad day eventually if you're a very powerful person or somebody whose people are interested in, And those are just some examples right there. Other things, password security. Like I said, MFA everything. That's multi-factor authentication. So when you log in, you put in your password, and then there's a second factor. It'll ask maybe for a fingerprint on your phone, or for that you take a number and put it in, or it'll just say yes or no. It doesn't matter what the method is. You just need to be using something to make sure that if somebody does get your password, they still can't get into your stuff. Another way threat actors have really been screwing with people is what we call in the industry BEC, business email compromise. This is essentially just phishing, but it's usually a little bit more spear phishing, where they actually target an individual. And there are ways that you can kind of protect yourself, or at least minimize your risk when this is concerned. The first one is never open an attachment that is from outside of your organization if it's on your business email. It doesn't matter who sent it. Emails can be forged very easily. And even a Word document that you open can infect a computer that doesn't have the latest patches. So if you open a Word document, it's usually not an executable file. There's no way to run code from that. But if you have an older version of Word, there are exploits that can be put in there with programs like Unicorn from David Kennedy and Social Engineering Toolkit from whatever company that's from, that attackers use, and they can just embed malicious code in these files. You open it up, your computer gets hacked. And then they use that access if you're in a company to get to other computers. You have to really be careful about opening attachments and emails. Also, clicking links. You might think just going to a website can't harm your computer, but if you even have like one version out of date with Chrome or Firefox, they can get you when you go to a website, and it's scary. And last but not least, if you work for a company, you should be configuring all emails that come in on your company's mail server to have a little header that says, hey, this email's from the outside. Be careful what you're doing. A little example of that is right up there. Work from home has been a big deal in my industry because a lot of companies didn't know what they were doing, and then they caused a lot of issues where their users didn't know not to do certain things, and we ended up with a lot of ransomware infections hitting corporate networks and a lot of bad news. When you do have employees who work from home, they should be using at the very least a VPN and multi-factor authentication. Optimally, you should have an entire security operations center to monitor the traffic on the VPN. You should not be using like BYOD stuff, like bring your own devices, right? And baseline, you should have a baseline security footprint for all your devices that you give out to your employees. At the very minimum, it's got to have antivirus on it. It's got to have some other stuff like a VPN if they're going to be connecting to the work network. You have to determine if they're going to be using split tunneling or full tunneling. These are very important things that need to be taken into consideration if you're a company and you have people working and they're going to leak data. It's OPSEC. If you're leaking data and your employees are sending files that are internal to your company, to friends and family, bad things can happen. So you have to be secure. Patch management is a big issue. Nobody ever updates the software. There's a vulnerability for it. It's old software. Organizations should be using programs like SCCM or Endpoint Manager for Windows and third-party patch tools like 98 or Chocolatey to keep software up to date on the computers on the networks. And you yourself as a person should also be keeping the software on your computers up to date. If your software's not up to date, you're going to have a bad time. A little bit about physical security relating to operational security. If you have a wallet, right, you should make sure it's got some kind of shielding if you're going to be going to, say, a hacker conference. You can read a card on somebody's wallet usually very, very closely, but there is technology out there to boost that so that you can be read a little bit further away. In the same vein, the physical security and door access. It's easy to clone a key card if you're even like 5 feet within it. There's a device I built for one of my friends called the Tastic Rfid Thief. It is comprised of a little Arduino computer, and it fits inside of a long-range reader that's meant for garage doors in like parking areas. And all they do is walk around with this, and it will read everybody's key card in their vicinity. And then they can go and they can take a Proxmark, a $200 tool, and clone all those key cards and get into your company. You should be using a combination of a key card and a punch card reader, or the punch card reader, like a digit, punch in the numbers and yeah. Oh man, I've never given a talk before. I'm so nervous. I'm not even thinking straight. I'm sorry. Alrighty. That's what I was touching on here with access control. I kind of jumped ahead of my notes. Look, you can't secure against everything. That's why I think operational security is so important, because it involves figuring out what things you can control, about figuring out what an enemy would do if they were targeting you, so that you can come and you can protect yourself against that attack. No, not even the best InfoSec people in the world can protect everybody from everything all the time. You need to be proactive and do everything you can to keep yourself secure, because when you don't take your security seriously, others will, and they're going to find stuff. And I've seen people, rich people, who've done everything right. It wasn't even their fault, and they lost everything because they weren't careful. It's not like they were actively making mistakes. They were doing the best they'd ever been taught. They literally did everything right as far as they were concerned, and as the people around them told them to do. They didn't do anything wrong, but they still lost everything because they just didn't know these things, that you need to take security seriously. And that's one of the things I'm just trying to push here. There are a couple of things that make networks more secure. There's two frameworks out there that are really popular. One's called Zero Trust. Zero Trust, I have a funny little meme about it up there, but the thing is, Zero Trust is making sure, like if you had a hotel, every door has a key card reader. Every room you want to go into needs an individual way to lock to get past that. But do that same thing on a network. Everything is segmented. Everything needs. There's also the least privileged access model, which is you don't give people more access than they need over the resources on your network. You don't give people access to files and folders that they don't need. That's how the Google leak happened, because my friend Zach was able to exfiltrate data from it because they weren't protecting any files and folders. He shouldn't even have access to any of those files and folders. But you can secure against this kind of thing if you just take the time to set it up right. And then going forward, you put people into groups. These groups in Active Directory, if you're a computer guy, these are the groups that control who can access these files. If you're not in this group, you can't touch it. It's taking the time to set things up right the first time so that you don't have trouble later on. Also, ransomware insurance, huge thing now. Costs companies thousands and thousands of dollars, but you can reduce your costs on that, even if you're taking some very basic steps, like securing your network, doing active monitoring and response. Having just somebody who's in charge of security for your company is a big thing, can reduce the risk. So it's all risk management stuff, and I really hate that side of my industry, the risk management side. But it's important to at least know the basics, that if you're not teaching your users what they should be doing with user awareness training, and they click an email, is it really their fault? If you're not doing regular penetration tests and vulnerability assessments, and somebody hacks your 5-year-old WordPress site and it manages to steal all your data, or most recently the Epic hack that happened, it was a shameful thing that happened because that company was not doing security right.
You want to tell the Epic hack?
Sure. So the Epic hack was done by somebody claiming to be part of Anonymous. And that one of the first people who reported on it online on Twitter was this guy, Chad Loader. And because a friend of mine asked me to look into this hack, I was talking with this Chad person, and he gave me some of the information on it. And the long story short is they were in this network a very long time. They exfiltrated everything in 3 different segments. They have a website up that they call epicfail.is. You go to this website, it's still got a torrent file up there. You click that torrent, you can download the last bunch of the data that was released. These are actual machine images of these files and folders. These machine images are actual images of the web servers that hosted the Republican Party of Texas's website, among others. And all the data that was in that website, any users, any information at all on that website. So if they processed credit cards incorrectly, they were not PCI compliant, tons of data is in this leak. It is one of the biggest leaks I've seen in a very long time. It's split up in three parts, and if you are an InfoSec person and want to research it, you can get that data by simply going to archive.is, which archives websites, and then you type in epicfail.is, and you can look at the older versions of it, grab those torrent files, pull them down, and see a massive amount of scary data. So yeah, I am kind of more qualified to talk about that stuff than this stuff. It's just, I thought it'd be a good talk. So meanwhile, at Ransomware High, these three guys. Password reuse. This is one of the takeaways I want you to take here. Password reuse is horrible. Even if you're MFAing, you still shouldn't be reusing passwords because sometimes there are ways to bypass MFA that hackers know about that the general population doesn't. You got unpacked systems. That's a big deal I've talked about multiple times. Phishing, I talked about. And, yep. That's all, folks. That's all I got. Questions and answers.
So I heard you mentioned LastPass and password security.
I know they got breached too a while back. Yeah, I remember.
So that brings me to the bigger topic.
They fixed it.
Well, I understand that, but why not just have an offline password database that
Good.
you share?
Repeat the question.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I
Why not
apologize.
use KeePassX is essentially my question.
Right. His question is why not use KeePassX?
And then use YubiKey for two-factor authorization and then distribute the YubiKeys through your employees that way.
Excellent second factor. Yeah. So his question was, why don't you just use a YubiKey as a second
Well, why just use a
factor
offline
and then
password database?
and then
versus
offline
an
password database, right?
Well, to be honest with you, the whole
Scale.
KYC aspect from an online database is atrocious. I mean, you're talking about giving depends on your email scenario. I don't know how your emails are set up, but do you really want to give your personal email to these LastPass type companies?
That's a very good point. So
the data is the new oil.
agreed. Data is the new oil.
Yeah.
So
Data for me is what I try to keep to myself the most.
right.
You know,
So
I avoid KYC in all scenarios, and anything like LastPass is an objection to my objective.
understandable. So I actually would definitely advocate for somebody like you to use an offline password manager. The caveat that I have in my professional stuff is I have to build stuff that scales for companies, and teaching people to use offline password managers that IT might not know how to reset can be a hurdle. And I don't think they've actually solved and addressed that issue yet. But like when I worked help desk 20 years ago, one of the most common things they call for is password resets because they lost their password. And I'm sure people would lose their password to the password manager.
But
So there has to be.
offline with 2FA prevents all of it.
Yeah, it also locks users out of all their passwords when they lose it.
Well, you have backups, obviously.
Well, you should, but I
So
digress.
that's what I'm suggesting.
No, you're making great
Right?
points.
So you have the company YubiKey and then the user, if you will, but the employee YubiKey. And if there is a loss, you'll have a SOP in place for that to
Right.
take care of it, right?
Agreed. So there are multiple ways that this can be addressed. LastPass was the one I picked because it's just.
People know about it. I
Yeah.
understand. Yeah.
Thank you. And I appreciate the question and the commentary because I love when people listen and they actually ask intelligent questions back because it shows that they are paying attention and, so thank you very much. Nathan.
What common types of errors do you see in application security that would go on top of blockchains or getting into attack vectors? Like what were some of the common things that you would see in just regular application security that would be problematic or troublesome for people who go to blockchains?
Good question. Yes. So what common kinds of application security issues would you see that would affect people who are dealing with blockchain type applications? The most common, if it's a web-based thing, are going to be what are in the OWASP top 10. But if it's a hard, actual software coded thing, that's brain fart. So if it's a program like compiled into an executable or running on Windows type thing, you're likely going to see buffer overflows, heap overflows, integer overflows, lots of overflows. Essentially, when a programmer is writing a program, they don't always check that the thing they're putting into a piece of memory is going to fit there. And when that happens, you can overwrite the adjacent code, and you can get what's called arbitrary code execution using like a buffer overflow. So that would look like if you're on a seam, you see somebody send a string of F characters usually, or A characters, like a whole bunch of them, like 100 of them. And then all of a sudden, you start seeing this program cannot be run in DOS mode, which means like an executable type thing is going on. But from the perspective of the person who is writing the code, what they need to take into account is secure coding practices, which is a little bit out of the scope of what I'm able to talk about in this talk. But there are some good talks you can look at on Iron Geek's channel about secure coding. There's also a few DEF CON talks that have been done about it, as well as other conferences like ShmooCon. Mudge gave a talk about it a while back, I think at SummerCon. So there's people more qualified to talk about that than me. But just in short, when people are writing code, they need to understand not just how the code works and the way they want it to work, but the possible implications of the things that they're doing. And sometimes people who are taught programming in college just don't know these things. They don't teach secure coding in college. They just teach the basics. They'll teach you. Now I think it's Java's the popular one. When I went to college originally, it was not. The first time I went, it was I took Fortran and COBOL. I'm old, you know. But then it came out C, C++. These languages they teach in college. When you have a professor who teaches the language but doesn't teach them how to do it securely, like serializing data and just very basic steps to keep things secure, you have problems. And I think that's one of the biggest industry issues is that people don't know how to code securely. And as a result, they end up coding insecure applications that get put into production that then people find vulnerabilities for, and that keeps me in business.
I'm going to do a follow-up question and just extrapolate what the theme of my next line of questions is going to be that you can just go to.
Just simple question.
Right. So, if I say the word threat modeling to everybody, you kind of have an idea of what I'm thinking about, right? So, can you kind of give us, from your point of view, typically, what type of threat actors that you model for, and how you choose them, and the difference between the tasks that you expect, and things like that?
Oh, sure. So depending on what you're doing for a living, like hot new speaker. Based on what you've seen, what kind of threat model would you say that short-term recall sucks? One more time. Threat model. What
threat modeling? What is it? Who are the threat actors? And how do you forecast what type of attacks will perform?
Right. So each threat actor kind of has a unique signature, and there are companies that actually do DFIR work to identify when a company has a computer that's been hacked, and they can trace back sometimes to what group did it. Like they have different, they call them APT groups, but each company that does this in our industry, for some reason, wants to name things differently. So what might be, say, App 35 for one company, like Mandiant, could be Cozy Bear for another, and those are actually not the accurate ones. I'm just exampling, but like each company uses different names, and these threat actors are able to be identified because they use slightly different variations on a lot of the same techniques. A lot of the times, you'll see a lot of domain controllers getting compromised using a very relatively new technique, Bluekeep, but it has it should have been patched by now. People don't patch. So that they are able to use these things so they get a low privileged access on a person's computer in the company, and then they take that exploit they've got that can give them domain administrator right on the domain controller. And then another one was Print Nightmare that was recent, where the drivers that we all use to communicate with our printers, they install elevating, and there's issues with that. So threat actors are able to take advantage of that so that makes a user can install a printer without having to ask permission. So they go through that method to do privilege escalation and other things. But different threat groups, back to your question, I do ADHD rant sometimes, use different different techniques. And they actually, a really interesting thing is they sometimes pretend to be each other. They'll take the signatures that have been published in what are called Yara rules, and they emulate the other groups by taking those signatures and intentionally putting them in their malware, so that when they're found by the people who do the searching for them, it looks like the other group did. So misattribution. I think threat attribution is more of an art than a science, but it's outside the scope of what I do for a living.
So, if you do me a favor, you'll answer, it's kind of a complex question, but a yes or no will suffice. Do you see technologies like NFTs replacing things like deeds to houses, titles to houses? Do you think there is a better OPSEC approach for, social security cards, even driver's licenses? I mean, what if you were to design a DMV, how would you stop people from creating duplicate licenses outside of your control and adding them into the system? Because to me, NFTs are the best way to do that. I think in 10 years, your title to your house, your deed to your house, everything is going to be through a KYC NFT, unless people refuse the KYC format.
Good question. So to reiterate, are we going to just summarize?
Yes or no? You think an NFT is the best solution to that?
Both. Yes, but not yet, because we have people who are not technologically capable of doing
I
it.
understand the technology. I agree with you.
But if we didn't have to worry about people who don't even know how to use a smartphone, then yeah, it could definitely, I think, in my opinion, that it could replace it over time.
Boomers are going to be dead in 30 years.
Promises.
Sorry.
I just made the millennial cutoffs. Don't worry.
You never know with COVID.
All right. Any other questions? Comments? Thank you, everybody.
No. We're not ending this. This isn't over until I say it to them.
Yes.
So listen, the entire idea of this was to go, let's kind of depart from the idea of thinking that we're gods of security because we know a bunch about OPSEC, right? So he asked me a question about application security. He started asking a little bit about threat modeling. There's a whole big spectrum of security that you're the only one in this room that's really familiar with. So either, I don't know, I could get him to talk. I could get him to talk anecdotally about a lot of different things about security that me and watching the cryptocurrency may not speak about, or I can count on you guys to maybe ask a question.
I can ask you, I can let Jason's got his hand up.
So one of crypto applications are moving from a dedicated app to a web-based platform. Web-based, things that have a lot more security issues. Talk a little bit about that. I've seen a trend for these new web-based apps to be built across WebAssembly. Is that secure? And then using JavaScript.
Excellent. To reiterate, you're essentially asking, are the web-based apps more or less secure than the older type apps, right? Because I couldn't quite hear everything you said, but I think I got it. So there are, each type have their own inherent risks and issues. I would say that web application security is a nightmare right now. There's just so much stuff, so many dependencies programs rely on, like say PHP as an example, where threat actors will actually backdoor the PHP project, like through their modules that install when you do a fresh install, say on Linux, and it goes out to different package managers and it grabs different files. Well, they would find out like, hey, this person, this programmer was using this local library that doesn't actually need to be there, but the program, when it's installing, looks for that library. So if I make a library called that name, then it will go out to the internet and find that package and install it on all these people's computers who are trying to install, say, PHP. And it gets really scary when you get under the hood of how the programs that run the world. That was fairly recent, yeah. And it's not just PHP, though. Ruby, a lot of languages themselves that have dependencies that programmers rely on due to the issue of people putting in, when they're coding, using insecure coding practices and relying upon local libraries and includes. So like when you program in C, you do include iostream.h, right? What if when it went to go compile, I couldn't find that, but it was able to go out and then go, oh, here's iostream.h, and pull it down from some rando who uploaded it to some server that you never heard of in Russia. And then it throws that into your code as it's compiling. It's the same kind of thing, but it's app-based. And so the frameworks themselves, I think, have security issues that need to be addressed. On top of that, the applications a lot of the coders write, they literally have the top 10 vulnerabilities in the OWASP that have been around and slightly changed over like 10 plus years, more than that now, I'm old, where everybody knows about these things. Even people who don't do AppSec, who just do straight pen testing, know about these things. People who do vulnerability assessments know about this. And they're not, so it's like, everybody knows about the problem, but nobody really tries to address and fix it. And that's why I like great minds like people in crypto, because they see the problem and they try and come up with solutions that other people haven't thought of before. It's like, and one of my problems is I don't like stupid people. I can't stand them. And it's just like people who don't want to help themselves, people who don't want to look, people who are ignorant stupid, not like people who are mentally slow stupid, And
Stupid.
there's another word I'd use, but all my friends would yell at me.
And we're not PC here, man.
Yes.
But it is live.
It is. And so to sum up, to answer your question, is I think both versions of apps have issues. And I think the solution to both of them is just better education for programmers. Teaching secure coding as like a 102 type class, You need the basics of how a program works, maybe through flow charting or whatever, but then you teach them how to code securely before you teach them how to, do object-oriented code and more advanced things. Okay.
This is just about your background. What certifications do you hold? Do you have a SysP, OSCP, or?
So I'm working on my OSCP.
New one? Do you have your old one?
I don't have an OSCP yet. I have lab access, and I have I attempted it twice before, but I have not yet passed it. It is a rather difficult
It's a
test.
tough test, man.
Yeah.
No.
I do have my CEH, but that's fairly easy to get. And when you actually go to a place that gives it, they usually give you the answer key. It's a joke of an exam. So
well, it's
an
not a
HR
joke
thing.
of an exam, man. You got to give credit to everybody that put the time in to pass it. So.
Well, yes, but what I'm saying is the CEH, the company that makes it, is actually on like attrition.org as charlatans.
Well, when you're talking about the difference between CEH and OSCP, you're talking about the difference between high school baseball and the major leagues.
Exactly. The real difference between the CEH and the OSCP is the OSCP is a test where you have 5 computers, you have to hack them in 24 hours. And then one of them is actually, you have to write a buffer overflow and actually do like a web app. Like a web app, it's listening and you got to do your own buffer overflow.
Are you OS certified?
OS certified? Offensive security? Oh, OWASP. No, but I've done all the damn vulnerable web app stuff. I have a CEH. I have a Network Plus, Security Plus.
A plus?
Going back like to freaking 2001.
You got to start there.
I got a bunch of other like vendor certs nobody cares about, like network security experts from some random vendor. Like nobody cares.
Oh, yeah.
It's not the certs that matter. It's the ability to function under pressure, which I'm working on. That's one of the reasons I'm talking. Is it helps me get better at when I'm nervous.
Do you offer red team services and everything like that?
My company does. I'm not usually the one who does those red team engagements.
Well, how do people contact you if they'd like to do some kind of consulting or something like that?
Excellent. So you can contact me at frank.trezza at Atlas.
Say it into the mic.
All right. So I got 2 corporate emails. One is ftrezza@luminantsecurity.com. The other is frank.trezza at atlas-cybersecurity.com. I do work for both of them. Like I have 2 jobs.
I think we got 10 each. So.
I have a question for you. Can you clarify the difference between an assessment and audit and testing?
Yes, that's an excellent question. I'm glad somebody asked it. So he wants to know the difference between an assessment, an audit, and a pen test. So companies like mine sell different services, and they're geared towards different consumers. A pen test is usually required like once a year by a lot of big companies, but smaller companies want it too. It's a really big engagement. It involves testing the security of the company within scope, almost the same way an attacker would. If you wanted to go red team, that's a little different because red team is actually like an adversary. There is no scope. They can do anything. They can phish your users. They can hack them. Anything they can think of that a bad guy would do, they're allowed to do. It's based on the military term red teaming, you know? So whereas an assessment, like a VA, as I call them, a vulnerability assessment, usually involves just running a tool, verifying the output of the tool, and then giving it to the client. It's not heavy brain work. Any idiot can do it. I did it. I'm an idiot. There you go. It's not hard, and there are actually tools out there for pen testers who are extremely lazy and don't even do the reporting, like Namixoft, where you give it an SS file and it gives you a pretty report to give a client. So yeah.
What type of different expectations do you have from the results of a bug bounty versus a formal engagement with consultancy?
I'm sorry. Reiterate that once more for me. I heard bug bounty and consultancy, but the rest of the words were a little.
What difference in results with respect to a bug bounty and is the same company engaged in security consultancy?
All right. So when you engage a security consultant company, they're going to have a limited amount of time to work on your issue. They're on the clock. Like they give an assessor, somebody like me, a number of hours to do a pen test. Once it's done, I'm not looking at that network ever again. I don't care. You know, it's not my business. But when you do have a bug bounty program, you're publicly saying to everybody on the internet, hey, if you can hack me or hack these specific things I put that are within scope of hacking and show me how you did it, I'm going to give you money. So when you do that, you can get some really good results. And usually it might not even be as expensive as a formal pen test. But at the same time, you are literally giving any random person permission to hack your stuff. So you have to be careful when you have a bug bounty, the terms that you set, the scope that you set, what systems are allowed in scope and which ones are not. So they don't actually knock over your web server or, steal your user data and then figure out like, oh, they're only giving me $100 for this. Well, I might as well just sell it on the black market and get $4,000 for it. Why would I take $100? And you authorize them to be in your system, so they're not getting in trouble. Especially if you went on like HackerOne and you find the formal contract, you said if they hack my stuff, I'm good with it. So be careful. Any other questions?
Do you have any stories you want to share?
Sure.
Thing you witnessed?
Oh, yeah. We don't talk about DEF CON. Yeah, I got a few stories. So when I was before I was even in InfoSec, I went to NASA Community College out in Nassau County, Long Island. And we had no security program there, and I worked in the computer lab to pay for college as I was going there. And I came across some things that I shouldn't have found just by using the system as a normal user would. I had worked on a project in Association for Computer Machinery, and I searched for that project on the search engine built into our college. And I found my name, but it wasn't my project or my folder. It was my student record file with my social security number, my address, my phone number. And when I went up a folder, up a directory, I found everybody else's. So I tried to inform them of this, and this is my first dealing with what was formerly called responsible disclosure. And a lot of the reason people don't do responsible disclosure is because companies sometimes suck. And that's when I experienced this. I told them about what I found, and they fired me from my job in the computer lab. They accused me of hacking. They told me that they were not good to me over this, and it upset me enough that I was like, you know what? I'm going to go learn all about InfoSec now. I'm really going to hack stuff. So, yeah. So that's one story. And I actually did eventually get that professor fired, but it took me 2 years. He had essentially taken the student list and put it in his own home directory. And then it was publicly accessible to anybody who hit the web server. So, yeah.
Was that a long time ago?
Circa 2003. Right. And that's one story. You want to talk like pen testing stories? Those are a dime a dozen, but it's probably best to talk about those at the bar and not where I'm being recorded. Anybody else? I guess I answered your question satisfactorily. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. There you go. Let's switch the camera back to the phone.
Who's next, Nathan?
All right, so that other phone is right here. Yeah, if the speaker's not standing up here, nobody's gonna hear him on the phone. I tried, but the audio sucks. That's the audio, yeah. The audio was bad, yeah. On the phone, the audio sucks. Yeah. No, we can figure it. That sucks.
We built stuff for the future. We started off our journey in 2017 building a multi-currency wallet on the Waves blockchain and a twin sale which allowed vendors to accept 44,000 different cryptocurrencies. We've been building and scaling that company to profit since 2017. In 2018, we filed the U.S. patent to tokenize electricity collected from solar. We're currently exploring that with a hardware patent with a hardware partner that we built into in the Texas Houston area. Right around the end of 2019, after scaling Silicon Valley, completing an accelerator and chasing Calicanis, we realized that innovation was stifled and it was ripe for the picking. So we decided to make endeavors into the electric vehicle space and space tech. Well, you guys know what happened in early 2020. So we pivoted our entire company during the pandemic and built a bartering platform that allows people to change goods and services without cash, circumventing the current supply chain. As we built and scaled this and put the life back in a hospitality point that we had built through concierge, we ended up getting endeavors into space tech. And what's really interesting about space tech is that it's really ripe for integration with blockchain. A lot of people think space tech needs to be an astrophysicist or an engineer. No, you just need to be a subject matter expert in whatever you're doing, because every single position in space will eventually be realized. So what did we do? We decided to take an AI PhD scientist and plot trajectory of objects.
And around November of last year, we ran across the venture capitalist space and said, well, to your customers. Well, that's interesting. We hadn't thought that through. We thought everybody's going to want to use GPS, but your GPS, if you use your car right now, has 0 customers, 0 pay. Everything is free. So we started to look at the DeFi scenarios and how those integrate. We looked at how blockchain and entities specifically exchange the supply chain. We're going to need to have a payment space. There is a need to have a universal settlement layer where you can spend and buy things in space without having to deal with curve. Currently, if I wanted to make a transaction in space, I would have to send a call from space down to Earth, then have my bank wire the money to the other bank account, and I'd stay in the clearinghouse for 3 days, 5 days, and then call it back up to the option in order to get a confirmation of payment. Well, remember that point of sale that we built? It operates on QR codes. It allows you to send instant payments in space with 44,000 different assets. This is just one of the many projects that we're working on. As the spring rolled around in 2021, all of our friends started talking about NFTs. But if you've known us, you probably went to our event about NFTs in 2018. If you've been around the game for a while, you know that we were at Art Basel in 2018 talking about art on blockchain. So it only makes sense for us to start to get into the NFT space. We started off by making one of my daughter's watercolor. Then we made one for one of our friends out in Texas for an entire gallery. This is where things really got spicy. Well, that gallery was for somebody with big angels. Big angels had an event in Vegas. They allowed me to talk. I spoke on the subject. And we ended up getting the Thomas Kincaid art collection. 500 art pieces that we're going to be doing with NFTs and putting them out into the market. Now, you're probably thinking, well, anybody can build an NFT. It's pretty simple. No, it's not simple when you're doing it the correct way. And the correct way is to build it on 2 separate blockchains. And that's what we realized. A lot of the NFTs that are out here right now are meme coins. They're not backed by any assets, and they don't have anything pegged to them. Well, what if I had an actual piece of art? What if I had that painting right there? That's an actual asset. How would I go about deploying that and making money on the NFT market? Well, it starts with making a one-of-one asset-backed digital asset. So you build that, we let it wait for that. It's easy to deploy, but it keeps it separate. So then if I want to go to Ripple or OpenSea or Solana or any one of the other options that are out there in the marketplace NFT space, I'm free to deploy these assets without having to worry about the projects dying. We also had happened with Solana last week or 2 weeks ago. These are concerns about the market right now. As we grew and scaled this company, our second customer that we got was $100 million in Khan Dynasty Jade from 2,000 years ago that we're tokenizing to put in the lobby of Caesar's Palace. Well, it's interesting because my girlfriend is a space venture capitalist, and when she found out about this, she's like, hold on a second. Can we do this with space resources? Can we do this with asteroid mining? Can we do this with moon mining? What's stopping us from sending a lunar lander up to the moon and collecting moon rocks and bringing it down and turning it into high-end jewelry? That's where the NFT space is going. These pain points are going to burn out. These platforms are going to burn out. But if you have actual assets backed by a digital asset that you can track the supply chain, you can track the provenance, you can track the ownership, you can track the value, and that's where the true value proposition comes in with cryptocurrency. You need to have an actual asset in the first place in order to make an NFT. The idea that you can have this economy based off of meme coins is ridiculous. But a lot of people are doing it, and we're just trying to change the volume of that. So as we built and scaled this company, we ended up going to Draper University, where we paired up with a company that does 3D scanning. We now have 32 deals in the pipeline with a par value on each deal of $750,000. We're tokenizing the music collection for the Hard Rock, one of the hardest, most known music memorabilia collections on the planet. We have a winemaker in Napa Valley that sells average wine bottle of $5,000, and we're currently tokenizing that. So to say that we're leading the space in NFTs is an understatement. As we move and as we build, so that people don't get screwed over. Chris Starr, my business partner over there, we have always came into this industry with integrity. We came into this industry because we got ripped off, and we were not okay with that. Perfect. We put our foot down and said, you know what? We're going to build a forum. We're going to build a faucet. We're going to start blogging about projects. And that evolves into what we have today, which is Future Stuff Incorporated, currently in the blockchain space, the EV space, renewable energy space, the NFT space,
and also building a farm-to-farm bartering platform. These are all venture-backed businesses that Chris and I are building and scaling from the director level. So with that being said, we're going to open this up into an NFT panel. I know I kind of set the tone as what I feel NFTs should be. I'm sure there might be a little variance of opinion, but I'd love to open up a discussion. Prior to bringing on the panelists, are there any questions anybody had on any of that stuff I just said? Is that a mic drop then?
NFTs.
All right, so we've got Josh and Josh and Frank. Is Jason coming on the panel too?
Yes.
All right, so we've got Frank, who you guys just met. I'm Daryl. This is Josh, who you're going to meet a little bit later, and this is Jason, who you're going to meet a little bit later. And we are here to have a chat about NFTs.
Right. You doing it over here?
Yeah.
You need for that.
Got it.
Right on.
So,
Are you guys part of the Ape Yacht Club or whatever it's called?
The what?
Board Ape Yacht Club.
Yeah, Board Ape Yacht Club.
I probably would say.
That's an 8.
Anyone have an ape? Any ape holders?
We got some ducks.
Gutter cats, baby. Gutter cats.
I know Chris Star likes those ducks.
All right, so I have a partner who is raising some kind of auction for investors with NFTs, but I can't really wrap my head around it.
Okay.
Have you heard of anything similar, and could you give me maybe some kind of insight or?
Yeah, there's a lot of auctions that are going on in the NFT space. There's a lot of people that are realizing that they have IP that they can put on the blockchain to monetize. One of the key benefits to this monetization is that you get residual income. So, one of the partners that we have on this project is Candy, right? I know you've met, but Candy runs the Las Vegas Sports Store. And that is a collection of pro athletes after their pro athlete career looking for ways to monetize. And so she's looking at, taking custom images of them, one-off images of them, and tokenizing those for the prominence aspect, for the ownership aspect.
Okay. So I'm convinced some current athletes, and I have some footage of them. Will NFL get in the way of how I want to tokenize what I have with them, or is it something more towards the actual player? Like, am I able to make moves with the player's content, especially if it's not using any kind of memorabilia or like practice type of branding from?
So here's where it breaks down with pro sports. If you are using something that happened at a game, the NFL owns that. If you're using something that happened at a restaurant or at a family event or at some sort of private event, then there's different parameters. So if you were to use, Tom Brady throws a pass, you have to go to the NFL. If Tom Brady's walking into a nightclub, you don't have to go to the NFL. And so there's definitely a caveat to that. So
even if Tom Brady is throwing a pass at his backyard.
Correct. Tom Brady throwing a pass in his backyard, you do not have to contact the NFL.
In fact, you can actually use the colors of his team. As long as you don't use the name of the team, you're actually going to get away with it.
So who has the licensing for Top Shots?
The NBA.
They really don't. That is an NBA sport. Okay. Yes.
Oh, you guys are okay with being recorded, right? I just want to make sure.
I don't want to be here.
All right, then I will not turn it that way. Sorry about that.
I'll move over there.
I'll just keep it. I'll just keep
They
it.
want to be recorded.
No, I'll just keep it at this
I'm not
time.
public. I'm not public.
Actually on the sports campus premises, it's actually on the licensing of the organization. Anything off campus is players.
Yes, that's correct. So the IP of a player while they're doing their job in the stadium or even at practice or anytime they're representing the NFL is owned by the NFL. And that's why if you notice they have to wear NFL branded gear. And that was the whole thing with Bill Belichick and the hoodie was they made him wear Patriots gear so he cut the sleeves off because there was no clause that you could cut the sleeves off your hoodie.
So pretty much NFTs right now, a lot of it is the basis of it is having something dope that you can turn into an auction or something that can be monetized, right?
Well, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. There's a bit of a disconnect between what an NFT should be and what an NFT is today. And there's a lot of people that are just making memes and images and selling them that have zero use case. Now, a digital image for a skin for a video game, on the other hand, that has provenance, that has a use case. And so you start looking at these different implications and applications that you can have, and that's really where it comes down to. So, IP aside, if you had a picture of you standing next to Tom Brady at the grocery store, you can NFT that. But if you have a picture of you standing next to Tom Brady in an NFL stadium, you cannot NFT that without the NFL's permission.
Someone's on that property.
I do.
So that's really what we're running into right now. One of our customers is the NFL players alumni. And so they're looking at what they can use without having to get the NFL involved. So if you've got a private wedding for Deion Sanders and you've got, whatever, for whatever reason, whoever's there, if someone wants to buy that signed image, that's usable. But if you have Deion Sanders, at a game doing his thing, you cannot make an NFT out of that without the permission of the NFL.
Is this a paddle? Is this a paddle?
No, this is a question and answer from my introduction.
So, NFTs, in my opinion, are kind of the greatest worst thing ever made.
I agree with you.
100%.
Because you talk about companies like Eventbrite, StubHub, any ticketing event corporation, their fees are astronomical. And with the NFT, the same way any DeFi project burns tokens, right? So you make a specific amount of tokens. Not only does it help the buyer because their fees are going to be less, but it helps the event organizer in the fact that you have operational control over all of the ticket sales. My background is in music, entertainment, and stuff. How many times my ticket count has been off by a couple thousand on $85 face price tickets? From the head count at the door on the guy. So
blockchain would definitely solve that. It doesn't necessarily need to be an NFT because the tickets have their
well, you want it to be.
own.
It has to be an NFT because you need a QR code established with it, or you need it to be a separate wallet address. Jason's going to know more about that. How would you do it?
Actually, a few years ago, there was a project called Authentication. They didn't fully launch, but that's in the concept used sometimes. But essentially, it's actually a QR code or a scan that allows them.
Just like the Coachella stuff.
Exactly, yes. And additionally, they had a loadable QR code loadable for other types of launch. That allowed them to purchases.
And handle the payment processing aspect of the issue. Yeah, well,
That's what I was trying to get at. Is it doesn't necessarily need to be
Could
an
you
NFT.
Could you do scan a POAP or the NFT? So basically, trade your ticket for a collectible. To go, here's how I'm redeeming my ticket by collecting the collectible.
just like if you were to buy, let's say I ran a limited run of hoodies on my website, but they each had an NFT tied to it. You would want something like that to where it proves that you bought the hoodie, because that's the payment processing issue.
The hoodie is a
Not quite.
That's the important part.
Imagine this.
Yeah, you
People say the ticket
Exactly.
stuff. Fuck that shit. You trade in your ticket stuff, and they give you like a big Danzig skull trophy. You went to the Danzig show, and now you don't have a ticket stuff. It's something way cooler.
Well, I understand. No, I'm talking. What I'm talking about. Have you guys seen the Supreme business model?
Yes.
All right. So they make a brick. They only make 500 bricks or whatever they do, and they sell each brick for $100, right? Okay. Their cost into it is, what is a brick at Home Depot? $2. $2. So they make a bunch of these bricks and they sell it. But imagine having that, because I'm an art collector. I have an art background. I've got Shepherd Fairies. I got a bunch of shit. You know, I'm into art. So, but the problem that I run into is the copyright. I can't take art that I own, even though I have a bill of sale. I own the thing. I don't own Shepard Fairey or Banksy or Van Gogh or whoever, Warhol. I don't own them, so I'm not allowed to mint there, even if it's in a photo. I'm not allowed to. So
So
there's a gray area there, yes, but no.
That's
I don't-
actually not accurate. So you are actually able to mint a one-of-one token through provenance, value, supply chain, ownership, and you are able to sell that actual item. And you would sell the NFT alongside of it, which would then log another transaction, which would show the location, the supply chain, the provenance, the ownership, all those things. Trust me, we're doing this with the
No. I just have a question. Okay, so let's say I have a one-of-one costume, right? Okay. I'm the only one that has this in the world. I have the bill of sale, the proof of whatever, all the docs involved with it. How do I turn that into an NFT without being copyright struck? You know, because
In
that's
about 2 minutes, by building a one-of-one crypto NFT that is backed by the asset, it logs all of the information about the asset. You take an image of the asset, you take the location data of the asset, the ownership data, the price, all the provenance
well, how do I
associated with
make
it, all
the
the
asset
layer.
tied to it, to where you own the art piece that's actually behind it with it? Does that
That's
make
literally
sense?
exactly what we're doing with the Tastic data collection. That's exactly how that works. Is you build a one-of-one, and then if you want to sell that painting, you sell the NFT alongside the painting.
The only concern about that is if there's some like third party warehousing, holding the art that can actually is responsible for.
Yeah, you need a chain of custody for the
Correct. Yeah, like NFTs were great technology, but like copyright is a legal thing, so it's not, it can't, it's not gonna change the law.
You need a stop for the chain of custody. That's it. So there's no company that's doing it, and that's what you're offering.
What we're doing here is this. What we're doing is building the one-on-one NFTs for actual assets. See that
So
cost?
yes, you would take chain of custody for my
Correct,
art.
100%. How do you know that it went from LA to Paris? How do you know that it actually
Yeah.
is that thing? How
Do you have
know
insurance?
the companies that we're working with do?
So like if I gave you chain, like I gave you my art, you would
You
have
wouldn't actually give me
insurance
the art.
on the art from the time.
You wouldn't actually give me the art. The art would be hanging on your wall. You contract.
I don't want the art on my wall. I want to give it to you and then go to the seller. Or the
It
buyer.
never actually goes to us. We would come to you, we would digitize the image, we would create the one-on-one NFT, we'd log all of the pertinent information, including, like I said, authenticity, supply chain, provenance, ownership, all the things that we've been discussing for the last 3 minutes, onto a one-on-one non-fungible token. All that information we logged into the script of the coin, deploy that asset, and then when you find a buyer, you sell them that asset and they get the digital asset along with it so that they know the legitimacy of it.
And what's your scope of assets? Anything from like shoes to computers to
We're only doing high-end. We're only doing,
cars?
yeah, like Barrett Jackson level cars, $100 million high-end CJ, Thomas Kincaid's art collection, the Hard Rock art collection,
Got a minimum on
your Fairchild wines, minimum price on the bottle is $5,000. We're not doing, memes of ducks and trying to sell pictures.
Yeah, you're not doing child.
I really don't know. So the token itself is definitely, it's not fungible, it's not as unique. But the artwork, what's to stop somebody from buying the artwork with the token? Then getting the forgery of the artwork, it looks like the actual selling that with the token, and then that person thinks they have the authentic one that's backed by them.
Because the digital asset is backed by the physical asset's layer of authenticity. So the authenticity layer would be the certificate.
So the digital asset is backed by the physical asset's layer of authenticity. So if the physical asset, let's say it's a $40 million Ferrari, well, they have serial numbers and VIN numbers and have been tracked and people know where they are. If it's a Picasso, then there's been an art house that's come in and verified that every step of the way from inception to verify that a Van Gogh or a Basquiat. There's people in the world that do this already. We're not reinventing the wheel. We're just taking the data that they're providing us and putting it on the blockchain.
Just to go back to your paintings, we did some consulting with the guy who's doing stuff for the Smithsonian, and one of the things that they were doing for their paintings was taking multi-dimensional infrared scanning of the painting. So even if somebody tries to copy the painting, the size and the thickness of the paint in so much detail actually acts as a fingerprint.
Yep. Well, they're doing isotope. They're doing even gnarly.
Well, even the year of the paint.
I mean, like
type of the paint.
You can actually take that data and hash it and put it inside the NFT. Nobody will actually know
The
what
problem is
that
the
is.
copyright issue. You're not allowed to sell an NFT like, you know,
As a proof of
like
receipt.
Andy Warhol, right? Like, so I have his painting. Let's say that.
Right.
Okay. And then I want to mint it in an NFT and then sell it. I'm violating copyright.
Not if you sell the one of one asset with it. You're talking about making a 1 of 100 meme coin of.
So you're
I
talking
don't
about
understand
making a
that
meme
because what
coin.
I've been told is different.
Well, I'm telling you the professional capacity, this is what we do. We're working with Art Brand Studios out of LA. They're one of the most reputable art dealers in the country. And yeah, we're pioneering this for one-of-one high-end art collectibles.
That's like saying.
So where do you make your money? In minting the NFT or what?
I can actually answer what he's saying as well.
Yeah.
As an owner of a physical object, you are allowed to create your own receipt. If this product is your receipt, is your version of the receipt, nobody can challenge.
Who's responsible for the transfer of the asset?
Well, I don't know, that has to be
Not
determined,
us.
determined
Not
in
you.
your relationship. No, that would
So
probably.
it could be any third party.
We're building the verification layers.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right. Are you going to implement full KYC or
Depends on the application.
and the amount?
I know crypto, we always like to do trustless, but like with physical custody assets, there has to be some party, like it can be sure it would be trusted, some sort of, be able to handle the exchange that's, on behalf of the buyers. Just, like, in that situation, we might have that and receipt, and you might have physical objects and such, but then eventually, you like, when all payments are gone through, they switch it out. And then, yeah, you might be able to get the NFT, not if they be smart. I'm sure.
Well, the chain of custody is so important. I mean, especially, Sotheby's. Look at Sotheby's. That's kind of your example of who you want to compete with in this space. If you want to make this successful, you need to be better than Sotheby's. You're trying to be better than Sotheby's. Well, you offer NFTs. That's
The other thing that I've seen is very interesting is some people have been doing stuff, and I'm not, well versed in this. Some people have been doing auctions in free ports using NFTs. So the actual physical auction is in a free port, and there's some tax advantages to that. You probably know that if you're an art collector as well. And using NFTs as a representation for somebody who's not physically at that free port. It's a fine line. Who knows where that's going to end, but that's what people are doing.
No, I just wanted you guys are doubling down on exactly what I'm saying, and I hope that you
I agree with what
understand
you're
what we're
saying.
talking
I
about.
think you have the right approach to everything you're saying.
Okay, moving on a little bit.
Yeah, any other questions or?
Exciting. NFTs are exciting.
They are, but they're so across the board, and I think that that's one of the things that we might want to talk about. Yeah, go ahead.
That goes to exactly what I was just saying. NFTs right now, we're still very early, believe it or not. NFTs can be anything which our society is going to create and make of it. So I follow little trends here and there, and I see things before they happen, sometimes a few years in advance. So I invest towards that direction. So when it gets there, I'm already in ahead of time, and it's worked out so much for me. But I see NFTs could be anything that we want. There's a certain percentage of society, as well, even in the entertainment industry right now. There's that part of society that we're just gonna have celebrities, even though I like some of their stuff too. They might be just making like them walking up the stairs in their house, and they're gonna sell it as an NFT. I don't know if it's that extreme, but I've saw some things already leading to that direction. And I'm not for those NFTs that are cheap or something. I think the NFTs that are going to be really good are stuff that can be recorded, just like if Michael Jordan wanted to put his clips from years ago, along with Tom Brady, if they were doing something. There was somebody doing something with Michael Jordan, but it wasn't Tom Brady. And it was on.
How about Elon hitting the blunt?
Snoop Dogg or something, it can be.
To double down on what you're saying, we have one of our customers is Interscope Records, and what we're talking about doing with them is taking a rapper and think about this experience. The rapper shows up at the studio. There's conversations that never get recorded. There's things that never get recorded. The rapper's in the DJ booth, the rapper's laying down tracks, and what happens when they stop recording? What happens with the outtakes, the beat tracks, the shit that never hits the record? That's something that if you're a true fan, I like Jay-Z. If Jay-Z got in there and released like Jay-Z walking to the booth, Jay-Z going over there and talking to the producer, the worker. He likes Dre, whatever you like. If you like that, then there's a market for that. And I would buy, maybe not, that probably just for Jay-Z, but I would buy those outtakes. I would buy that stuff just to have that, to be like, this is cool, and I'm the only one that has it. And so that's kind of the use case for these IP assets. That's really what we're talking about, is we're taking intellectual property and we're putting it on the blockchain.
So do you think going to labels? So do you have to think going to labels the best or going directly to the artists?
We got approached by the label. So we didn't go to the label. We got a phone call. Hey, this is Interscope Records. We heard what you were doing with NFTs, and we want to discuss how we can monetize some of our, rappers' portfolios.
Gotcha. Okay. Because I know artists. I know at times, like at the end of the day, just because Interscope wants it to happen, the artist necessarily won't allow it to happen. Just the same case with the payments. The states and the licensing and things of that nature.
Well, so that's where it comes down to who owns what. And so if you're in the recording studio, you're technically in. Think about it as if you're in an NFL stadium.
Right.
That's
but the willingness of the artist kind of supersedes at that point, right?
Well, so the artist is going to be the one making residuals off of this.
Now, if you got the labels involved.
Well, the way we're structuring it, it's lucrative for the artist.
Technically,
forcing it, you're protecting the artist's interest to make sure that happens.
Yep, and giving them an extra monetary monetization stream, so they're able to actually make more money. What's that?
Not a lot of people are sure that will happen.
Yeah, so then that's what happens. So when you build this on a smart contract, you can't come back and change it. You can't come back and say, oh, by the way, we decided we want to take 100% of the residuals. So that's what protects the artist going into these agreements.
Okay.
The other thing to note is that in music in general, the person who pays for the master recording, so if I'm paying for the studio time, then I own the masters during that studio time. Possibly.
No, definitely. I mean, at the end of the day, even though if you pay it almost always goes down to the agreement, right? Because just because you pay doesn't mean necessarily you own it. It comes down to the agreement, right? Because even if you pay $1,000 an hour for the studio, if I'm Jay-Z, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna still pay that.
Yeah, right? Jay-Z probably owns the
studio. So at the end of the day, a lot of contracts says if the artist covers the expenses for it, so said, or even sometimes the agreement can say, hey, multiple 10 times what it costs. Yes, it's $1,000 an hour. Most studios only cost $100 an hour, so you get a rate, but still, they can record that shit. So then it gets back to that, and that's what the artist under control. But even regardless, it's like, fuck these labels, bro. Go directly to the artist. Go directly to the artist if you can. I can help you with it.
We're trying.
I can help you with it. I got you.
I appreciate that.
You guys see this NFT phase keep going on? It seems like meme coins are just like JPEG images. Is that going to keep going like this, or there's duplicates of so many of these?
In my opinion, not without use case. Like I said earlier, if it's a skin for a video game, if it's an upgrade for something you're playing that becomes something in augmented reality. There's a cafe in Silicon Valley that has memorabilia, much like there's paintings on the wall. There's all this memorabilia from famous movies, and so they built a AR/VR experience. And they've NFT'd all of their memorabilia. So in order to see this memorabilia, you have to buy an NFT to access it. And I think they made like $250,000 just with their random, it's a coffee shop. But because they have this memorabilia on the wall and they built this, augmented reality AR, VR thing, they're actually able to sell these coins for access to their memorabilia. So that we pioneered, that idea kind of pioneered the hard rock integration that we have.
And in my space, in security space, I've seen some pretty unique uses for NFTs myself. Some malware developers have actually been putting their samples of the malware in NFTs. That way, even if the AVs wipe it from the planet, there's still a copy of it somewhere.
So it gets into your MetaMask and just takes all your stuff.
In the same vein, a while back, I believe somebody actually put a copy ICAR test file that AV uses to test if something's a virus or not in the blockchain for Bitcoin, which I imagine it probably wipes people's wallets. I don't know if it did or not.
So I do.
Yeah.
Just got No, what, okay, now you're doing the art like that with the NFT. What's to say you can't just sell the NFT separate from the art or make duplicates of them?
Well, the NFT would have no value if you didn't sell it with the actual art.
Exactly.
The NFT would have no value if it didn't sell with the actual art. Now, understand, the art doesn't actually have to move to sell the art with the NFT, and that's one caveat. So let's say you've got Picasso in a museum that you donated to the Smithsonian. You got, my neighbor had a GTO that he sent up to an automotive museum because it was like perfectly restored. Well, he still owns that. So how do you show proof of ownership? And also, how do you show supply chain? That's one of the biggest things. And supply chain in the cryptocurrency space is something that is not being utilized enough. It should be one of the biggest things we talk about because it's not fintech and it's not currency. People don't talk about it. NFTs in space, we're using that to track the launch, the lander, the retrieval, the payload. It has nothing to do with a meme coin. It's just, that this is a one of one, and that when we take a picture of this lunar lander, that actually happened. And so tracking supply chain, ownership, provenance, those are what we really should be focusing on as we deploy and build in the NFT space. Problem is, much like the ICO, IEO, STO, was a DAO craze, no matter what you do, 90% of the market is going to be people trying to get that quick money grab. And so that's the issue that we're facing right now. Will non-fungible tokens survive the NFT craze? 100%. They're non-fungible tokens. We might have to call them something else. We might have to change how we brand this thing. But the idea of having a non-stacking, one-of-one digital asset that you can record and scribe any amount of information into, and it can never be changed, refuted, manipulated once it's deployed, that's not going anywhere.
That's what gives it value. I'd like to just speak a little bit about the supply chain aspect. So in regards to NFTs being used in supply chain, recently we have one of our subsidiary projects have partnered with a juice model for Fresco and Extranini to track their supply chain from basically field to store. And they're one of the largest juice bottlers. So it is being used. NFTs are being used to track. But I know other companies are using NFTs as well in this manner. So I believe that, just like Daryl said, NFTs are not going anywhere. It's not changes. Personally, I feel with NFTs. So one of the real uses for NFTs in the future is going to be contracts. The NFTs themselves will be not just for C, I pretty much know for a fact that C is as for these contracts. I know certain programs for things like destructibility, play a part in this whole infrastructure. Once NFTs are finally used as in the those contract, crypto will have access to the market that's over. And it's makes anything that we're doing currently small peanuts. Like the crypto market is like 2 trillion right now. If you add up M1 money supply, it's like 10 trillion. You go higher and higher. But the majority of the money in the world is on the floor. Just like everything else, you gotta get where the money's at. Eventually, that's what we're
And question, brother?
Yeah. I don't know if I need to.
I don't think they'll be able to hear you on that.
So we all agree that NFTs have future in the marketplace, 100%. there's no deniability in that. It kind of goes back to what I was asking. Do you think that government entities will start taking use of NFT technology for, like I was saying earlier, SSN, KYC type stuff?
I'll start blazing.
And how would they do it if it's in Decentraland, essentially? You know what I mean? How would they stop us from saying we're creating our own monetary system? It's kind of an economist question, right? Because I think NFTs can be used for great or evil, like total evil. I mean, you're talking about social credit score, all the bad. You will become an NFT. Ready Player One. And then a second question too is, do you think this whole digital real estate thing is just a hype train or total bullshit?
Well, I mean, to answer two first, I just explained that it isn't bullshit because of that cafe that's in Silicon Valley that has built its own VR experience and is selling access to the real estate in there.
But if there's a competitor that creates a way bigger, like Oculus said tomorrow that they wanted to create their own crypto world, it shit out everybody else.
They need users. They would need users. Oculus.
Well, they have users. They've got how many people with Oculus headsets? How many Oculus headsets have been sold? I mean, like, they make that the only thing you can use, just like Apple. I mean, Apple makes you use their own charger, and the EU just said, screw you, we're going to do our own thing.
Headphones too.
So, but I mean, I'd also like to say this. I would love to give you guys a chance to move some of my art into minted NFTs. As long as I don't get sued.
We'll introduce you to Art Brand Studios, one of the largest art brokers in the country. Currently under their management, they have Thomas Kincaid.
I've got
They've got
berries, dollies. Yeah, I got.
Well, they also have
monopolies,
licensing for
a bunch of
Disney,
stuff.
Star Wars, and Marvel. So these guys know how to move products, and they have the right connections to be able to get monetary value out of that piece. So if you do want to make that connection, I'll introduce you to my team over there, and we can get that conversation started.
That's awesome because I've had a plan to start like the world's first NFT gallery.
We own virtualNFTgalleries.com, which is awesome.
Yeah, awesome. You guys are awesome, man. It's awesome. Thank you for everything.
Thank you. All right, who's next? Are you next?
Yeah, you're next.
Nate, where are you at?
Smoke break.
Yeah.
Definitely smoke break.
Next meeting. Thank you,
Talk
meeting.
about stuff.
Oh, is that something keyboard?
Keep it before my.
Are you,
I like
Yeah.
Fine.
We'll be back shortly after this brief commercial
Safety
break.
meeting.
Like literally 10 minutes away from here. That's what
You're gonna pre-warn us with questions. We're gonna uplight them. Scary flashlight.
Hello and welcome to InfoSec ghost stories and crypto stuff and other things we're all going to talk about. These people are here. We are back. Stream is live, so don't say anything that you don't want to broadcast on the internet. Also, if you don't want to be in camera frame, don't stand by the camera. Who doesn't like to be on camera? I mean,
Also, I'm open to learning new things. I'm very smart. So.
excellent. Learning is fundamental. It is fundamental.
People used to call me the human encyclopedia flight attendant too. So okay.
Oh, cool. You ever deadhead anywhere? How do they verify when you're deadheading somewhere that you are who you say you are? Do you actually work for an airline?
There's a KCM.
What's that?
The known crew member badge.
We build stuff. We switch out.
Yeah, that you get known crew member badge when you graduate.
He's setting up all the vinyl shit.
Does that have like any barcode or anything on it? Or?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously that's a big
Yo.
Can you tell us a scary story?
Scary stories.
Tell us a scary story.
I can tell you a few, but I want to talk a little bit first. Just kind of get into the rhythm. Also, this is a bullshit way for me to give myself time while I think of what the fuck I want to say.
What's Spooktober?
Spooktober? It is Cybersecurity Awareness Month.
Spooktober.
Are you ready for Cybersecurity Awareness Month? Are you secure?
I think I am.
Boarded up.
Are you? All right. So,
Everybody is here.
oh, there.
Southwest border.
This one is pretty recent. This is a hack I thought was fucking amazing that I observed and I saw somebody do while monitoring a network. So I had a client out in the middle of the ocean on a yacht, right? And they have a satellite uplink. And on their yacht, they have like a NAS and they use it for entertainment and like all their movies and shit. And they have a Plex server on it, which you would expect. And they torrent like people do, and they pay a fortune for that torrenting when they're at sea. And one time I'm looking at this network and I'm
convenience store boarded up. The only places that were operating were. I'm telling a ghost story.
Oh, it's all good. So I'm looking at the network traffic, and these guys are definitely compromised. Something really strange has happened. And but how would a hacker attack a boat and get in there? Turns out the guy saw they had a NAS device, and they were using the same password to this NAS device that they had used for other things. And you can log into a NAS device in the cloud and then use it to get into the network. So this was like an expensive high-end one, and it could run virtual machines and stuff on it. So they got into the NAS, and then they booted up a Kali virtual machine. And they were literally remoting into this Kali machine that they had spun up on the boat and using it as a pivot point. And they were trying to steal all the data from this person who was a wealthy person on a super yacht, And they were trying to filtrate the data, but the uplink was so slow, so we were able to cut them off before they got anything good. But if that had been a regular network, they would have already gotten everything. They would have been out. And I'd never seen somebody use that methodology before, where they take over the NAS, the freaking network attached storage, just because of password reuse. And password reuse is terrifying because everybody I know, who's not an InfoSec, they just use the same freaking password for everything. And I've seen some really scary issues with password reuse with people who I thought were brilliant until I found out. There's this guy in New Jersey. He makes the equipment that the jails use to find cell phones, right? So, the jail goes around, they're looking for a cell phone, and so this guy got hacked, and he actually wrote a book about it, and then he got hacked again, and wrote another book about it. He calls himself an InfoSec professional. He's really not one of those, but he knows a lot about computers, just not InfoSec. I see that a lot, Steve Gibson from GRC, and guys just making shit. They're not authoritative sources, but everybody looks up to them, and they give out bad advice. And this guy got hacked twice. So because he'd gotten hacked twice, I was like, hey, let me take a look at this guy's website. He was running a WordPress site with 6-year-old plugins,
that were all outdated, and I could have gotten into it fairly easily. So I just told him, hey, man, you got to fix your freaking website. But that's like, what I find scary is people just doing stupid shit like that. Like,
I cannot hear you.
oh, I'm sorry, dude.
Sit over here.
Yeah.
The microphone's there.
You can check. Microphone check.
1, 2, 1, 2. But as far as like ghost stories and InfoSec, I'm not really sure. Like, I can talk about different breaches and stuff I've seen, or I could just reiterate shit from a DBIR report. But like, I don't know what you mean by ghost stories. Like, you mean just shit that will scare people who don't know?
Like a ghost in the machine. Really?
Right.
Or some anomaly, or what do they call them? Undocumented features.
Hey, you know what? You know what I think would be really, really good for the cryptocurrency crowd is let's talk botnets.
Botnets are fun, but before we go there, I want to touch something that might scare you a little bit. Your phone that you currently have in your pocket, if you have your Wi-Fi on and you're not connected to a Wi-Fi network, it is broadcasting to the world every Wi-Fi network you've ever connected to. And if somebody's listening through setting their interface to promiscuous mode and like capturing the packet, they can tell who you are based on your phone and use that to de-anonymize you, even if you're trying to be anonymous. So just because you have your Wi-Fi or Bluetooth on, they can figure out who you are.
You never bring your phone to DEF CON.
Exactly.
I got SIM hacked at DEF CON. Fucked up my whole fucking Verizon bill, and my sister got involved because she's a security person, and so basically, like, I walked into DEF CON because my good friend over here invited me to help with AV, and somebody passed some sort of something on to me, and then I got a phone call that was from like India. I answered it, and within like an hour, my phone's SIM card was in South America and ordering Ubers in South America. Well, first it went to San Francisco, then it went to South America. And, that's one of the things you got to remember when you're at a security conference is don't bring your phone. If you're going to bring your phone, turn off all possible ways for it to accept information. Kill your fucking NFC, kill your fucking Wi-Fi, kill your fucking Bluetooth. All of the things that people don't think about. They take it for granted. And because my sister says that she's some big, security person, she called Verizon and said, we had a SIM hack. And Verizon was like, oh, well, what nefarious things are you doing? And shut our account down. So if you ever do get a SIM hack, play dumb, go into Verizon and say, my phone's not working. Because I got SIM hacked a second time about a year later, and I did that, and I had a new SIM card within like 20 minutes.
You don't even need the SIM hack anymore. Like, there's I briefly touched on it, I think, during the talk, but Lucky 225, he's a hacker who just goes by his handle. He did this research where he found the companies are not checking. You take out a plan to send these text messages. You could take over somebody's phone if you're willing to pay the $30 for the plan, and they don't check that you are. They don't send a text message first, like, hey, is this really your account? You just sign a piece of paper saying yes, it's my account, and that's good enough for them. And then they can do the communication with the network, and they get it all set up so that you can receive messages and as that person. So when that person goes to do a password reset, it'll send the text message, and then you get the code. You go to Google first, you enter it. Then when they get the code, they'll probably just ignore it because they didn't request it at that point. They don't even know somebody's in their account. And once you're in the Google account, most people just tie everything to that. So from there, you could just take over everything. They probably even have their passwords saved in there. So you could launch a Chrome window, use the account, log in, and then,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And once you've tied a Chrome account to it, you can go and undo all their passwords. They'll all be synced over to you, That's
why I'm not a fan of two-factor authentication through Google. Yeah. And a lot of people swear by it. And I think you touched on this in your presentation, is SMS, two-factor authentication is failed. And there's so many gateways for hackers to get into it. So that's one of the things you got to remember is when you're backing up your accounts, and trust me, I've made a few mistakes with this. I could tell you a scary story about, $115,000 in Gala coins locked up in a wallet that I don't know where the private keys are.
I got 1,000 in Dogecoin. I bought from my friend's phone service called Much, whatever the fuck it was. But he was running like a voice service, and you could only buy it with Dogecoin. And this was before Dogecoin was really a big thing.
Yeah.
I just bought a bunch of it to buy his service, but then he was having issues with it, and I never used it. Forgot about the wallet, and years later, it's like $1,000. We don't have that fucking computer anymore.
So that was a real story about us losing our private keys to our Gala node wallet that has $115,000 in it
That's
right
a
now.
lot worse.
But we're working on mitigation strategies and understand that there are companies out there that can recover crypto, and there are people that know how to find those routes and get into those accounts. So all is not lost, but it definitely sucks when you're like thinking that you have this capital in the bank, especially when the coin goes from 1 cent to 20 cents and you can't cash out.
Yeah, if you want to track somebody's crypto on most of the things I've heard, there's this thing called the dusting attack. What you do is you send very small increments of cryptocurrency over time, repeatedly, to that wallet, and then when they go to transfer the money to wherever they're putting it, you can track the transactions through the coins that you had initially given. Like you track your coins, and then you know where they're going. But let me ask you a
Jason,
question.
hold on,
Oh,
Jason. Do you have any more dusting stuff to talk about?
Yeah, I guess. With dusting attacks, I mean, these have been, even beneficial. Privacy currencies like Monero got dusted, a bunch of times, and due to their low mix-ins, they were able to track like some 97%. Oh, sorry, I was trying to speak up. I know that currently on Bitcoin, CipherTrace has been dusting. Not just them, other different groups, Elliptic. There's several others have popped up now. It's become a big business. Tracing people's transactions, linking people's addresses to their personal identities. Any which way that they can, IPs, whatever. The only way right now, that I can think of that has been kind of stopping dusting attacks is zero knowledge proofs, just because you can't see where the transactions are going. Where in other chains, even like Monero, you kind of can figure out. So even though Monero has plausible deniability, if you run if you're willing to brute force out the combinatorics to it, you can figure it out. And the man's got a lot of GPUs. we're talking, they could go to Amazon and be like, we need 100,000 GPUs on this project, or they probably have their own warehouses and stuff with their own proprietary hardware. But I know where I live, there's I'm not sure of anything with InfoSec related, but they do a lot of aviation stuff, like proprietary aviation circuit board design, putting the chips on, all that type of stuff. So it wouldn't surprise me that they have some ASIC for this type of,
ASIC, you think?
Yeah.
Are you able to explain what a 51% attack is?
Sure. Yeah. So
Hold on. Do that, and then go into DPAL.
Okay. So 51% attack is when proof of work network, an attacker is able to basically produce 51% of the hash rate necessary to basically rewrite history. They can undo a transaction. So how this actually occurs is that an attacker, it will run a copy of the regular blockchain that will run a chain at a certain point, will split it, and then mine that chain privately. And since there's no competition, he knows he'll get all the blocks, and his goal is to build a longer chain with more proof of work, more work, on the chain, because the rest of the network, when he broadcasts that private chain to the normal network participants, they're going to see, hey, this is the valid chain because it fits the rules of what is a valid chain. What is the true chain, which in Nakamoto consensus, longest chain tip with the most work. So why people do this is to double spend. So they will spend money. They will typically deposit at an exchange. They spend that coin, withdraw into the victim currency, typically Bitcoin or something high value.
No, I'm saying somebody's phone is in there.
They will conduct the 51% attack, which will undo that initial transaction that deposited onto that exchange, and then basically the attacker gets their coins back.
but they've already made off with the BTC from the exchange.
Pretty badass. That latest hack that I saw,
she's over here like this while you're sitting.
a very similar theme to this.
I'm trying to just look at you, but yeah, I can see it.
It was a few weeks ago. Somebody had hacked, I think, one of the exchanges and taken a lot of the money and then given it back, or a portion of it back, not all of it. How did they manage to do that? Oh, yeah, you heard anything about that? Or?
You're referring to. Well, I mean, there's been a bunch of hacks of crypto.
It was fairly recent. I don't think it was even a month ago. I think that the basis of the story was the guy hacked the exchange, or it might have even been a coin on the exchange, but he hacked them and then gave it back. Like, but he didn't give everything back. He kept like $1 million at least worth of crypto.
Yeah, it's. I mean. It doesn't really narrow it down too much for me.
Sorry,
but
if you were going to hack an exchange, how would you do?
Okay, well, yeah, I'll touch on. There's two stories that what you described come to mind. So one was with Thorchain.
I was like,
basically they took advantage of some error in their code,
but then I moved to Vegas
to essentially take funds out.
Separated.
Basically, like my understanding is just capitalizing on the spread in their system.
So I was in LA.
There was actually several others that had I'm not sure the specifics. But then there was one on Ethereum.
Then he moved to Vegas.
Yeah, it's either Ethereum or Binance Smart Chain. That it basically. Like I said, I don't know all the specifics, but at one part of the contract, they only verified like the first 4 or 5 digits of a hash, which allowed the attacker to. Well, yeah, essentially, yeah. Even though it wasn't a true collision with the whole hash, they only had to match the first 4 or 5, so it was pretty easy for the attacker to generate these fake hashes. The guy, with that Ethereum one, he definitely read into the code. So
then I left Light Group.
There's speculation maybe it been an inside job, but I mean, it could just been sloppy code. They just trying to.
Tends to almost always be sloppy code.
Yeah, it's. Ethereum.
Yeah, no. So I started off.
I think this is a big issue. Just trying to do these public, smart contract, world computer type of chains. It's just that, just practicality. It's like, do businesses really want to run a business fully in private or fully in public? On a chain where custom data, see how people are using funds,
with a deal and contract,
spending, that doesn't actually seem very good. And then we see the practical limitations too, we can't just scale something that fit 8 billion people on at once to do every aspect of their lives. I think that's a very flawed way of thinking. It's not how the world works. And there was an Austrian inventor in the 30s. Maybe a little bit before, I was 20s or something. He said this quote, his name is Victor Schauberger. He did a lot of work with vortexes and stuff, but his famous quote was that, comprehend nature and then copy it. Trying to have one thing dominate the entire world is not how it works. I mean, there could be, how humans, some may consider to be the top species, but there's still hundreds, thousands of other species. Same with crypto. And more specifically, same with smart contract platforms. It's just one can't fit everything. And not to mention, why would they want to, especially as a business? Why give all this data
business aspect?
That's the whole thing with the open source versus closed source software argument. It's if we open our source, the hackers can find vulnerabilities and hack us. But if we close our source, we can have vulnerabilities in there we don't know about, and no one's going to be able to tell us.
Yeah, well, and unfortunately, I've seen this actually happen, and the feeling is that they'll purposely do that too. Just.
And so
a security through obscurity practice that it's not even I want to say it's even almost malicious. It's like they know there's shit wrong, but they just don't open it. They can peddle their wares, still without taking responsibility. I don't know. They hide behind the closed sources. Nobody knows what it is, so it's like something happens. It's because the attacker
Okay, so what is
broken. It's not that because we fucked up. Where with open source, you can literally see, it's we fucked up.
I saw a thing of passing the buck like that recently in the news with the. There are memes about it and everything at this point where a website, if you just looked at the HTML for a teacher's page, it had their social security number and all this info that shouldn't have been in there because of the way they were passing the data back and forth.
Were they stored in local
hidden fields and like XML? Yeah.
Okay.
And like it was just XML. So if you looked at the HTML, the XML that was in there was just data about the teacher that was not being displayed on the web page. I guess they're using it in another system and they just linked the two systems, like maybe their HR platform, and the data was being passed, but since they weren't using those fields, it was still in the code. And you just but as the end user, you just open the page and look at the source, and you were seeing the source, the IP address, the social security numbers, and like other privileged information for these teachers. So rather than like be like, oh shit, we screwed up our website, they tried to screw with the person who reported it. And they like held a press conference saying they're a malicious hacker for looking at HTML. Like only an HTML hacker could decode HTML. Really? I think my sister knows that.
Speaking of, Nathan brought up botnets earlier.
Oh yeah,
HTML.
Let's talk about botnets, man.
So this is, I guess, a ghost story. So back in the day, I ran some adult sites. Nothing major, but like Splog type shit. And none of the things that we would do to try to trick the different traffic monitors. Sorry, is that there's HTML5 resource called pre-render. So pre-render will do two HTTP connections and the DNS prefetch. So it will do a DNS as well. And I think it's preload will actually load the JavaScript from a third-party domain before you click the link. Just even going to the page, it will load it from that third-party site, so you have the JavaScript before you get there. I called this the poor man's botnet.
I see where you're going.
So
now.
what we did was blogs, right? And basically people would send bot traffic, and it would basically trigger these resources, which then from their IPs looks like it's going, it's viewing, it's connecting.
I could have got it for you because we were fucking getting referrals off and fucking getting
poor man's botnet.
Is that not a thing anymore?
I
don't think so.
Yeah, not real botnet, right? It's like, what people used to do, I'm not sure if
you can go to the airport,
low end networks, typically get
you can just
resource indicators.
No, even though my personal car,
so that
pick you up. I mean, I could probably go past your pickup
because like JavaScript,
but they gave me shit. I think I dropped pussy off one time. And they were giving me shit.
Making sure it's like,
threatening writing a ticket. I'm like,
but the really shitty ad networks, at least back in the day, this was
is the alternator
over a half decade ago. 7 years.
Yeah, you did yourself? Fucking done. I had my buddies
656.
Okay, because the whole thing I was telling you about is
that's how a lot of the miners work. The browser miner malware stuff works.
Right.
Very similar methodology.
Right. Yeah. What makes this awesome is that
you get in there and you fucking take the steering.
There's no steering pump out. It's just a resource that they have to actually turn on.
Kind of hard to even
and the users not
so
I'm
gonna buy.
Unless they're using like no script or something.
Well, yeah, but
which is going to be rare. Grease monkey, like people play with stuff.
Smart people might do that, but the majority of the world's not going to fuck around and turn off HTML5 resources. It's just that's not going to happen. But this could also aid in DDoS attacks.
Yeah,
I mean
amplification.
Yeah, and also just some added background noise for the DNS level. Because you can do all the your normal stuff, different subdomains and shit. Just keep on switching it out.
They made a press release where they went through
there's a lot of
years.
You can get
generations of these.
and it's very low effort, low intensity.
And then it showed the
because,
DC2.
yeah, why this is my a lot of research. I just read a paper last week about some research on it, and it could have gone a lot farther. I mean, some of the typical things like cookie stuffing that that could be done. But
you still do
there's one I didn't even think of. I mean, it's very delicious that way. Like you do cross forgeries with this.
I'm not
essentially, maybe swipe somebody's funds over.
Very
To,
cool.
do some other action. They don't want.
Yeah.
Coming early.
Typically steal.
I would steal all the cookies and then just keep them local and load them up myself, and then see what I could do with that. A lot of sites, if you have the cookie, they're not verifying a lot else, and you can usually like session hijack that way. Like just take over their login. There's not necessarily a bank account. They usually have better security than that, but like Facebook and shit. Usually, like there used to be a browser plugin you could use to just steal people's Facebook threads if you were on the same network, and like it just did it by looking for cookies that were being passed in the clear on the same network that you were on, and you could steal their cookie and log in as them. And there's lots of interesting shit like that.
But well, speaking of session hijacking, there's this trend of people using jobs as their auth tokens, and there is not cases of
Go to the light.
Several different sites. It's not a good thing.
Is it?
Yeah. Because I know even a couple months ago there was a universal cross-site scripting vulnerability in Edge.
Yeah.
Like their
it's the way they were using the WebKit source code, right? They had modified some shit.
Well, it was with the translator. Something like it didn't sanitize. So basically, you could type out a script in just normal text and stuff, but when it would translate, it would actually run it. And so like that could be used to basically steal people's accounts. And that's a lot. That's kind of more gold than.
I like that NFT attack that happened recently, where they we were talking about it last night. They essentially just they found a way to put some code in an image so that when the page was rendering it would read the code, and they made that an NFT. And then people, when they accepted these, hey, you got a free NFT, click here from the exchange they were already on. They were now logged into the exchange, and it did some cross-site scripting and stole their funds. Like that's a pretty novel attack. I hadn't seen anything like that before, because the amount of complexity involved just to think that you could render code from an image. It's not through Stego or anything. It's literally just the image. So I thought it was freaking awesome.
Yeah, I wonder how they did that.
At first, I thought it must be in the metadata.
Yeah, that's what I was
tried to I tried to dig more into it. It seems it's just some way, like if you like when you cat two files together, but it can still append them. Like you cat like two files together in Linux, combine two files raw. Some file formats will still just work normally, even though there's garbage data at the front or the end. So like you could put two zip files together and like or in a Word doc, it's a zip file, and you can put other shit in there that's not supposed to be there. It's the same kind of thing, and I find this shit really fascinating. Like I'm not the best AppSec guy, I do pen testing, and like I don't do usually web app pen testing. I do like internal network shit, and I just run Responder, and and because LLM&R is enabled on like everybody's computer, that's link local multicast name resolution. You can essentially steal anybody's credentials on the same network as you as they're authenticating to Microsoft Exchange, or as they're authenticating to a file server. You can steal their hash, and then you can just send it off the Hashcat and crack it, or you could pass the hash, where you take that same hash and you proxy it to the server they're trying to connect to.
So it doesn't actually do the hash; it just does comparison.
It does quick compare. You just pass the hash, and the guy who wrote that, Lauren Grant, is just a genius. It's like I actually support him on his Patreon because the dude has just done so much for the community, and nobody buys his tools. So he started this thing called Porchetta Industries, and I have now access to some really cool tools that he's developed that are even better than Responder for that kind of shit. So it's really wicked what you can do on a network if you're just connected. Like I was looking at the hotel Wi-Fi, the hotel I'm staying in. It's kind of a disaster show, man.
Hey, speaking of which, something I noticed. Have you ever been to Europe before?
Yes, I fell down the Eiffel Tower once. It was raining.
difference between the Wi-Fi security at like hotels and cafes and stuff in Europe versus the US is like night and day. Europe is like, at least every place I went to, long ass randomized passwords. Like we're talking like 30 some characters.
Well, you have to think it's about a bunch of like neighboring nation states that have a very long history of warring nonstop. Whereas the U.S. has what, Canada and Mexico?
Yeah.
They might try to take the Alamo.
Like the Alamo. These Canucks they're going to storm DC again, like they did in 1812.
Josh is right there.
Spy.
We yeah. What's next, Mr. Nathan? You're on the spot.
All right. Well, there's a conversation I've been wanting to start, and it's what I wanted to do before we started Ghost Story. And that is, I wanted to have a discussion with you guys about cryptocurrency and blockchain not being a space or an industry or any type of business thing, but the realization that it is a sector. That you have a public sector and you have a private sector, and there's now a decentralized sector, which is akin to what the private sector might have been about 230 years ago.
Interesting. Well, what's the difference between it being a space and what you're talking about? Like
About it being a sector?
Yeah.
Well, if it's going to, if we're going to subscribe to the idea that code is law, and that we're going to disobey and disregard any law that tries to limit or regulate it, because it's code and you can't threaten code, right? So then it would follow that we have these pseudonymous developers that are creating tools, creating platforms, little SDKs and stuff like that, where people can deploy their ideas for an unfettered improvement on what they think should be. If other people subscribe to this, then we're creating this entire sector of subversion's an ugly word. Let's call it adoption of prosperity instead. That would be much more of what it is.
It's where you're going, and that's what I'm trying to make it up.
Right. Well, I mean that's the thing, you know, like people that dissent, people that dissent and don't like certain power structures are thought to be wanting to tear it down and cause damage and chaos and disorder. And it's like, no, we very much like order. We just want improved order, better performing order that is also consensual.
I love that. How can NFTs and stuff like that help free speech?
So my main concern with anything that I talk about is how does it expand freedom? NFTs are not at a point, they're not doing anything right now where they expand freedom to the degree that they deserve my attention. I am still much more interested in ideas about privacy, naturally.
Is that because they're tied to institutions? And in order to monetize an NFT, you need to operate on a marketplace, and the marketplaces are generally centralized?
Well, no. Naturally, no. It's helped DEX as a whole. NFTs have helped DEX as a shit ton. But that's fantastic, and it helps develop the tools that will be necessary later. However, they're cause and effect. In the long game, they will have a place. Now, they're not making the disruptive impact that I'd like. So, I understand they're doing the legwork to be relevant to me later down the road, right? So a lot of people are making money on it and stuff like that. Fine, fantastic, and good. Congratulations. I'm always going to work on what expands freedom most, and right now that's not NFTs.
Interesting. I would say that it's a bit opposite when it comes to an artist's ability to monetize their artwork or their IP outside of the parameters of the standard mechanism.
So, no, what they're doing is they're incurring taxable events that all these NFT kids are going to have a very, very difficult time realizing the taxable events they've created in the past year or so.
Oh, for sure.
100%. A lot of them are cashing out and buying houses, and it's like, so well, you got a big tax bill to pay.
So that's where systems like Gilded come into play, that they can track all of this and they can integrate into legacy systems so that you can actually
file and correctly.
No. The filing part is the problem.
I
We're
get it.
creating another sector that is out of the purview of the control freaks, right? So it's like, well, if you were to conduct yourself in some fashion, then you have to disregard, disobey, and say, I'd rather not associate with any of that. I don't want to be war profiteering. I don't want any of my artwork's funding to go towards bombing people or
Oh,
hurting people.
interesting. So
Right. So
how
it's
do
like,
you avoid that? Just not realizing your gains so that it doesn't go to taxes.
well, maybe.
Or realizing your gains in tax-free havens.
Maybe if we saw some better dexes or dexes that use obfuscation or dexes that use authentication, those would be ways to go about it. But as of right now, and just a lot like
guys,
was,
yeah,
which was an NFT craze, but the current NFT craze is weirdly much larger. The idea is that it's stress testing. It's kicking the walls, it's kicking the ceiling, it's flexing, it's moving everything around, and it's going, how far can you push this thing? And the end result of what's happening with all this NFT stuff
the PHP error came up.
betters the industry as a whole. However, doesn't really immediately expand freedom. And another thing is you're going to have a bunch of kids who are unprincipled, right? That don't really understand freedom. They don't understand the necessity of Bitcoin. They don't understand why. They don't understand monetary policy or anything like that. And it's like, okay, well, maybe if you have your dick kicked in with taxation through your fucking trades, maybe then that'll be the kickoff point for you to start understanding.
So then what's the solution?
Like,
I mean, how do you avoid funding the
You know,
wars and funding
like, don't
things
just
that we're
let
trying
it
to
sit
avoid
on
and
the
being
server
free,
just
but then
forget
still realizing profits off of your intellectual property?
Some people could, I suppose. I would never do this. But I mean, I guess some people could maybe fake an NFT theft, cash out into something like a Monero or
Like when you lost all your
Pirate.
guns in a boating accident?
Something kind of like that. But like a
Boating
digital
accidents
version.
are rampant lately.
Man, the crypto community and the
I
gun
honestly
community
think that
are
should
the
be-
worst boaters ever.
Actually, if you guys are like, I know you guys do events and such, and that would be the greatest event ever. It's
A boating
just,
accident?
Well, it's just like a giant
Demolition
boat.
derby.
But that's the point. The point is to like sink the boats.
Grab your wallets.
like
Grab your hardware wallets. We're going boating,
Call
gentlemen.
the pirates. Call the pirates right now. We're having a pirate war.
The army mates here.
Get
Yeah,
your hardware
and-
wallets.
derby,
We're having a
man. That's
boat
awesome.
demolition derby.
Especially if we all took pictures with us holding
Guns and all.
something. It's like I approve. I have witnesses.
So I see your point, and you're still working within the parameters of the system that you're trying to fight against. You're not actually helping advance any movements.
Well, the idea is if it is its own sector, which it very clearly is, it cannot be if people adhere and obey like the old guard.
Yeah.
So it's fuck the old guard. It's for example, if you were dating someone and you broke up with that person, and you started to build a strong, beautiful, fruitful relationship with another person, and your ex called you up and is like, hey, here are the sex acts that I will allow you to perform with your new partner. And these are the types
Great analogy.
these are the types of dates you can go on. This is the amount of money you can spend on gifts for this person. Okay? If you defy me on this, there's going to be penalties. You would never get that phone call. You would hang up. You're fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Like I already hate you.
So then maybe the solution is to realize profits in space.
I appreciate it.
No.
Why not?
Everyone in the space industry is strictly adhered to like the benevolence of a governor for launching in a new state.
For launch.
Yeah, exactly.
But once you get up there,
Well, guess what?
You can do commerce without having any governance.
Do you think that's what the FTC and the FCC are going to say?
Once you get
No.
beyond their parameters of control,
Well, that's why I was explaining earlier that a DAO has to be essentially autonomized. It has to be self-executing code living out of the parameter of man, where people slave for a bunch of code, but the code is outside of the whole thing, and there are privacy protocols beaming its benevolence back down to the fucking rock.
Well, so that's the thing. If you never beam that value proposition back down to the rock, then you don't have a government to have to pay taxes to.
Wait, hold on. Do you realize you can just not answer the phone and not answer letters and not file anything and have the same result?
Yes, but then you live a very different type of lifestyle. But if you
Why?
can put that financial transaction in space and never realize the profits on Earth, then you can live that same lifestyle within the parameters.
But you're lying and you're hiding, and it's
You're not hiding
cowardly.
anything. You're not hiding
You should be proud. You should be strong. You should say, "Look what I created. Look what I created, and fuck you." You go, SEC, IRS, you're below me. You may not speak to me. You're not my peer. These are peer-to-peer transactions.
No, I agree with you 100%.
I have fired
But
you. I've
what's the solution?
disassociated.
What's the terrestrial solution?
Disobey and disregard. That's what it's always been.
Not partnering with countries that might not have
Never
SECs.
partner with a country.
What about Malta?
I'm getting business.
No,
cards
you
soon.
can
Very happy
partner
about that.
with dissenters
Companies
within a
actually gave me
country.
business
You're
cards
like,
from
okay,
most companies I've worked for. I had to
ten
get my
most
own shit.
disassociated or
I usually did a contractor.
dissatisfied
thing,
people
so
with Ecuador.
have a
Come with
company
me.
I mean, in
actually,
theory,
10% most fucking odds.
So think about this. In theory, I could put a boat 200 miles off the coast of any country.
No, you're missing the point. You don't have to go on a boat. You're free anywhere you fucking go if you're man enough to be free. You don't have to run and hide. That's ridiculous. You're fucking free wherever the fuck you are.
So then what's the solution in the United States so that you don't
Get more guns, learn how to use them, let everyone know, let the cops know. Go to the police station, be like, guys, I want to let you know, I own a lot of guns. I train with them frequently, and I'm very free. I'm very, very
the
free.
first one to volunteer for that.
Yeah, right. Like,
You're the first one that's
in
gonna go to
theory,
jail.
this works.
What if it
but
court me?
in
I'll do it
theory,
tomorrow.
Like our good friend is
I
doing
would do that
fucking double
tomorrow.
life because of something like this. So, like in theory, like it works, but in the end
No,
result is
Ross wasn't. I don't want to use violent in the wrong context. Ross was a peaceful person. What I'm explaining is not violence. What I'm explaining is defensive force. What I'm explaining is violence is a byproduct of violating something. Okay? Using defensive force is never violent. It's always okay. It's 100% of the time necessary. Okay? So to try to equate the Ross situation with this is absolutely absurd. Ross was the guy who tried to create successfully created a very fruitful free market space, and he's doing Satoshi's time. There's no doubt about that.
That's a good way to put it.
So he's doing Satoshi's time. He was the guy that were like, yo, 9 Inch Nails, put him through that motherfucker's hands, put it through his feet. Let's fucking hang this bitch up for everyone to see. That's what happened to Ross. And it was very gross. What I'm suggesting is, I don't matter to the IRS. I don't matter to the SEC. I don't matter to the CIA or the NSA. They don't know my name. They don't care about me. And if they did, I'd be like, oh, I don't give a shit. I don't care about you. Disobey and disregard.
Are you suggesting that all the people that realized profits in 2021 NFT creation should not do anything about it?
Well, why do we use cryptography? Well, what's the point of the cryptography in all this? Because we don't want to use centralized services like an IRS or like an SEC or like an auction clearinghouse or anything like that.
Transactions are on public blockchains with the exception of Monero that you are able to see all of the transactions. So all they have to do is run a simple bot and they can run all that information. And then they're like, by the way, Nathan, you made $1.2 million last year off NFT sales.
So the way I see it is people
buy gun. Protect yourself. Look, listen, if Chris has a fucking yard sale and has a sweet ass lawnmower out there, right? Let's say I'm fucking 14 years old. Me and a couple of my asshole friends decide to chip in on a fucking mower so we can start a little landscaping company, right? Guess what those are? They're fucking securities. Because they're investing, we're all investing as a group to buy his fucking lawnmower so that we can go out totally unregistered. Fuck you, Chris, you piece of shit.
But what if Chris sells 20 lawnmowers and now he's realizing profits of $50,000 on these lawnmower sales?
Then we have to cut him ear from ear and hang him in public so everyone knows you're not allowed to conduct any business ever outside of the purview of the SEC.
This is the most
the
viewers
IRS.
that this cast has gotten, guys. This is the most viewers that we've had.
Finally
on this
getting
live
interesting.
stream. Ladies and gentlemen,
Finally getting
Nathan
interesting.
Hawk, I present to you
No,
We lost one. Nathan, keep ranting.
it's not ranting. They're facts that we have to come to terms with if we're going to be successful,
No,
if we're going to be
agree.
fruitful.
Listen,
No,
I
it's not a
agree.
matter of if you agree. They're
Taxation
fucking
is theft.
facts.
Taxation is theft. The IRS has no right to know what I'm doing with my money. The
No.
fact of the matter
They
is-
do. They do if you use their shitcoin.
Okay, fair enough.
If you use their
And so
fucking shitcoin,
that's the
then
realized profits
yes.
I'm talking about.
Then get away from their shitcoin. Anything you do outside of their shitcoin, you're fine. You have zero obligation to those psychopaths. Zero. You go, I prefer peace. I prefer persuasion over coercion.
So I have a quick question with taxing, right? And IRS taxing the Bitcoins and transactions, like Coinbase reports everything you do to the IRS, and then they go after you if you don't pay your taxes on it. How hard is it for people to get around that? So I know like some people set up like whole freaking things where they get citizenships in other countries to get around it. But why not just like fake an ID from another country and like set up a like go on like Magbo Marketplace, buy a Russian fake ID for $5, and then like just use that as the initial documents when you're signing into creating your account.
You don't have to do all that. Imagine if someone, right, bought a burner phone, took the burner phone, took their own crypto to their burner phone that was paid with cash, maybe in another state, maybe in another country. If they took their own crypto, reported it as a theft, traded it for a privacy coin, and then traded it back to themselves on a third device.
Oh shit!
Well, now you have a loss
but
to
who are you gonna
report.
report
No,
to
you have a
when
loss to report.
Yeah.
Now you've just created a beneficial event for yourself. Well, I don't know what kind of piece of shit would do that. I always say disobey and disregard. I would never advocate.
Never.
No.
Oh, now we got 2. We had 9 before. I'm gonna head out in like half an hour.
Well, all right, then listen. If we're gonna do that, let's do atomic swaps, and then we're gonna get Josh on for a little bit.
If you got a phone, I can log you into this so you can continue after I'm gone if you want to keep recording.
No, I mean, dude, we're fucking hammered at a table. Fucking.
You doing this again tomorrow, or is this it?
Now we're doing it again. I just want to show off all the pretty lit up trees. And Trez, hey, check them out. We're in a really pretty place. It's really nice being here. No, let's do the atomic swaps thing, and then let's do the. Josh has a lot to do with potcoin too.
I mean,
And now I just had those
we're
rants and
talking
everything.
out here.
Huh?
We're just talking out here.
Well, I mean, the point,
Yeah, I
is,
mean-
like, we already lost it in there.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, wait.
So, all right, Trey, go sit next to fucking Jason.
Okay.
No, it's a good idea. You guys have good banter.
Dude, I don't know shit about that stuff. I don't know.
You're about to learn about it. You're going to ask really good questions. The questions you're going to ask are coming from a very informed perspective. You're about to learn about atomic swaps.
All right. Tell me, what the hell is an atomic swap? Are we selling fissionable materials to the Russians? What's going on here? How atomic is it?
So atomic in this case refers to like atomicity in the sense that either something happens or doesn't. So an atomic swap is when two parties are trading trustlessly between each other when they're There's two kinds of really atomic swaps. There's single chain atomic swaps, so that's when you're just exchanging.
I'm going to come in and grab one.
Ethereum,
Thank you.
Against a token on Ethereum. And then there's cross-chain atomic swaps. In this explanation of what atomic swaps are, I will just speak up just a little. I don't know if you Sorry. Yeah, here was So in this explanation of atomic swaps, we will, be referring to cross-chain atomic swaps in our case. So, with atomic swaps, how we do them at Komodo with our Atomic Dex protocol is that initially there is a decentralized order matching network, and to connects a buyer and a seller, a taker or maker. They initially pay a fee, to prevent spamming the network, right? We figure there's a monetary cost.
They don't want you to do it to be a dick.
Exactly. Which people will. This is reality. People will do that. So, especially if you want this to be production level app, you can't have that. Other projects like Decred have done a different method, basically like a whitelisting method. So they're like, hey, you pay us a fee. I will whitelist your public key and you'll be good. There is such functionality within Atomic Dex, but it's a little bit beyond our scope right now. Another way that I've seen the order matching done is through blockchain networks. The problem with blockchain networks, as we found out early on in our Atomic Swap pioneering, is that blockchain networks are really great at handling the capacity for the amount of orders on an order book, and basically it was really bad though at matching those orders together. So when the orders when that happens, it leads to a very bad user experience. So what we end up doing is taking LibTorrent and creating our own, modifying and creating our own.
Are you guys using like a distributed hash table, or?
I believe they are. Yes. For running not a dev, business development. I just a bit, I'm testing software. I've done a bunch of stuff. So.
You use like the tracker model to find more peers, like when somebody's downloading a torrent.
Yeah.
It's like, hey,
That's
this person needs more peers. So match
that's in the background. So it's the user doesn't. It's the background tech is very reminiscent of the old LimeWire or that type of.
Oh, like a Nutella type network.
Yes, sort of like that. But
eDonkey.
Well, we'll just leave it at that because it's hard to
it's not a great way to make an analogy.
Yeah.
I mean it's similar but not really the same. It's very different. It's just like I'm trying to find a frame of reference an average person might know.
Right, exactly. Basically, with the Atomic Swap, the maker initially puts up their funds for the trade, and they hash lock those funds with a 32 byte secret. The reason why it's 32 bytes because there can actually be a problem if you have it too long of a secret. Doves will be able to explain that better. But anyhow, then the taker sees that you've hashed you have a hash lock on your transaction with that secret. They do the same thing to their own transaction. So since the maker knows what the secret is, they can spend the takers, their payment. Okay.
Ooh.
The maker spends the taker's payment.
Ooh.
Okay. Which then reveals the secret that allows the taker to spend the maker's payment.
I am lost.
Okay. So let's start. Say Alice and Bob. Okay. So Alice is we'll say taker maker. Alice is the taker. Okay. Maker, you put up your funds. Okay. Put it hash lock on it with a secret that unlocks, the ability to spend the funds. I see what that hash lock is. It's the string of numbers, right? I use that same string of numbers, okay, to lock my funds. You know what the secret is, so to spend my funds, you have to reveal said secret. When you reveal the secret, that allows me to then spend your funds because I know what the secret is. The secret is publicly revealed at that point.
That's pretty clever.
Why
isn't the secret like better kept? Why don't they encrypt it in such a way that the first person wouldn't be able to see it?
Well,
Alice, in your example, I think.
Okay, so the taker needs to be able to see the maker's secret.
Why is that though? Why can't there be some third party intermediary who sees that?
Well, I think you just answered your own question there. There's a third party intermediary at that point. So the purpose behind atomic swaps is to be strictly peer-to-peer. So yeah,
well, it's kind of hard to do that in this use case, though. If we're going to take the security in mind, from what I'm understanding, if the maker can see that,
you're worrying the maker will spend the funds before the taker can spend. They will spend both funds.
Yeah.
Okay. So the reason why this doesn't happen, it's part of the script that's that makes up the hash time lock address that person has a certain period. It's a time lock essentially. We have it set to 4 hours and 20 minutes.
Odd choice. Interesting. Under any connotation there with your devs.
For security purposes.
My guy
Thinking of the conference that we're at.
So during that time period, only the other party will be able to spend the funds.
Okay.
So you would not be able to spend your own funds until that time lock elapses.
Okay. It's pretty neat.
So the reason why this happens is because there is, even just in normal use case scenarios that come up, that one side of the trade can't complete. Say they're in the middle of a trade and their machine dies, their phone or their laptop or whatever, power goes out. And just doesn't come on for 6 hours. The parties have to have a way of getting their funds back.
Mm-hmm.
So this time lock allows, if they're able to reconnect in that time period, to spend the funds, or if not, to get it back.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty cool shit, man. That's a lot of brain power to go into developing shit like that. It's like
our lead dev, JL777, he's like super genius. Next level type of guy. He's one of those 10x engineer types.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah, it's insane. Like, it's really something else to watch those kinds of people.
It's like their brains are slightly different than ours. Like, they comprehend something a little bit better than a normal person would. Some programmers are outright, I think they're like geniuses, some of them.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Some of them are definitely idiots. Some of them are idiots. Like, there's the code monkeys, and then there's the real devs. You get the code monkeys who are like, putting out shitty code because they're getting paid minimum wage, like college intern type code.
They figure out how to solve the problem. They don't figure out the best way to solve it.
The worst thing is when they put those guys, in the college intern type kid, in charge of a big project to give them experience and exposure type thing. But they do their best, but still they don't have the experience to know what to do right. And then we get these gaping security holes in projects.
Yeah. So what area of security do you think is most lacking in not OPSEC, so like in field security, but I'm talking like software, hardware,
IoT, man. IoT is a shit show. If you're running IoT devices, you should definitely have them on a segmented network. A lot of that cheap Chinese shit that you can get for next to nothing is riddled with holes to begin with, and that's if it doesn't have a back door already. Like a lot of those things, like the light bulbs, the internet connected light bulbs, they connect back to China every time you want to turn your light on or off. It's like they use as an API to talk to a server in China to issue the command. Yeah, we're going to turn the light off or on, and it's like
that's like a national security issue right there. That's like what they're saying. What power consumption Americans are using.
And with like even the smart light bulbs, there's ways you can get like a netcat shell on them and use them to stay in somebody's Wi-Fi network. Like you put it on their Wi-Fi, right? And it's a Wi-Fi connected light bulb, so you can like change the color and shit, But while it's on their network, you can connect to it, and it's got a telnet port open. And if you dump the firmware, you know the password, and you can log into it, right? And you're in this little device. It's running a weird operating system called RTOS. It's like a real-time operating system. It's somewhat syntax-wise similar to Linux, but not really. But there is a way to get netcat running on that. And if you can do a netcat there, you could do a reverse tunnel into that network. So you would have it call, and there's not really enough memory on those things to like write. download like a big piece of code. So what people do is they'll put the code on the internet somewhere that like public, like GitHub, right, where anybody can get to, and they'll have it do a loader thing when it boots up. It runs its init.d type script, and it sees, hey, there's essentially it's like, I want you to go grab this file, like with a curl or wget type thing, grab the file, pull it down, and execute it purely in memory without ever writing to the disk, because there's no real disk. It's like just a little bit of cache that's on a chip. So you end up with the ability to essentially reverse pivot into people's networks by just putting light bulbs there if you know the Wi-Fi, and then you can always just access that network whenever you want, because it'll connect back to your server over Netcat, right? And then you could reverse pivot the other way, kind of like you would with like a reverse SSH tunnel, same premise, but using less secure technology. So IoT is, in my opinion, the biggest thing that we really need to worry about, because with all these shitty devices getting put everywhere, like the internet connected ice trays and shit now. It's really scary. And like, you never know if these shitty devices are on somebody's network when you're there, or if somebody's going to try and pivot from there into your shit. And another thing is Android phones. The ecosystem is so fragmented. There's so many different types of phones, and there's so many different manufacturers and OSs, not OSs, but like versions of Android, like KitKat and all that stuff, where you have this ecosystem now where it's impossible to do patch management on phones. So you can't get updates after like 3 years after you buy your phone, but people sometimes keep their phones for 10 years. So it's like you have these phones that are really, really out of date, and they tend to be on like the same network as everybody else. And a lot of times there's like Chinese backdoors and shit that could be in like a Huawei phone or some shit. And it's really scary. Like, they could use that as an entry point into like critical infrastructure networks that you normally wouldn't be able to get into. But those guys want to get on the internet, so they'll use their phone, thinking, "Oh, I'm using my phone," even though it's a network that's not normally supposed to go out, right? And then that's how you end up getting bridges into these super secure networks that are supposed to be segmented from everything else that we use to control things like industrial control systems and shit that maybe runs like a nuclear power plant. And it's bad enough when you find shit like that online on Showdown.
The 2 points on that is that, one, a lot of those industrial control places, power station, all that, they are running really good shit, like software.
Ancient.
Yeah, like ancient.
Never patched.
Yeah. Or they've done their own crazy custom stuff that's, not sufficient. If anything, would have created more holes.
I heard of a DFIR engagement where they were checking on it was a nuclear power plant in another country, and somebody had gotten in and was fucking with shit. And you only have to put a key in to do a firmware update on some of these devices, and the person was able to reverse engineer the firmware and upload their own to these devices that control really important functions in a nuclear reactor.
Well, yeah. So the reason why that is because what they use for these same things are called PLCs. They're very
programmable logic controllers.
Right.
Yeah, that's what they have.
Simplistic.
Yeah.
And they're not designed with security.
Their function, not security.
Yeah. And especially, during stages of I have some background in nuclear tech. I worked in Korea for a bit, a couple of years. I led a team, doing this stuff. So I know the thing that scared me the most over there was how they were running and testing all these systems, right? All during active construction. There was no fucking way that you were able they screened people and stuff. But let's just say if somebody wanted to, they could have easily snuck something in there, got in onto their systems, maybe nonetheless.
Yeah, and they're not really monitoring like they should be either.
Oh, exactly.
Because they don't have to for compliance reasons, so why would they spend the money to do it if they're sure
especially in Korean culture, because they have this thing called bali. It's like hurry. So, but it's like a very cultural thing. They don't want to they're always about it's like a very Asian thing, because this happens in Japan too. I'm not sure about China, but I know Japan's they try to never look bad in the eyes of the boss, right? So, will say things are all right, even though they know it's not a good culture to have when you're dealing with critical things. It's like if something's wrong, you better feel okay.
So you
enough
can't
to
admit
say,
fault, because if you do, the public perception of you is going to be changed. So you got to go with the flow and lie, even though you know something is correct.
Well, right? Yeah.
They can't, because you're saying their culture, right? It's like their culture just is not.
Yeah, doesn't do that.
I think there's some people in America who are like that too. You know?
Oh yeah, but it's a whole nother level there.
Oh.
Like it's like
I was thinking
there
like
are people.
politicians and stuff,
There are people in America who live like that, right? But it's like a corporate culture thing. Like it's different scales of But yeah, it's like basically they just turn a blind eye to things, and they just it ends up biting in the ass one day. It's what happens. Actually, I remember when I was in Korea. So what ended up happening, there was this big scandal in a company that they basically were cabling that was not, it was supposed to be rated a certain fire rating, and it wasn't actually holding up. It was like to a dangerous point, and apparently some inspector or something got paid off and stuff. And how they got caught and all this thing got exposed was that it basically he was cheating on his wife, and so she got pissed and ratted. Well, she didn't rat. She took the money that he received as like bribe payments and just tossed in the street. And there was like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of her on just in the, she tossed MF in the sky and stuff. And then people were like, where all this money came from him?
Yeah.
Of course, he gets picked up, and he cracked, and they had to pull out and redo tons of cabling, and then there was other issues too with how their control systems and stuff were trumping. Their tools were cut. So they ended up pushing back the project for I think it was like 3 or 4 years before they actually went live past what they were supposed to, because of all that shit. So, and this is all because, in the case of the Korean dude, it's corruption. But I mean, which is also another issue. But also, like, he consciously knew what he was doing was wrong for the people, and that's. I think people.
It kind of reminds me of the when Tesla. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Like when Tesla had that data breach a while back, and their head of security just paid off the ransomware people and didn't tell anybody else except the internal team about it. So nobody knew there even had been a ransomware attack until it came out much later, and then he had to testify before Congress and explain what the fuck he did. It's like they had a breach, and there could have been customer data that got taken, and they didn't do any of the security that you normally do after that, like a DFIR engagement. They just were able to get away with it.
I have a question. Do you think data will ever get to a point that there's so much data on people around and out there that these breaches have less and less of an impact? You can kind of at least predict based off of a history of already prior breaches, what the future is going to have. At least probabilistically hold so you can make good decisions. It's just the value of the data goes down. I mean, I understand the argument for data freshness because, especially in the marketing aspect of things, but there's certain things that don't change, right? You can only leak social security number 7 times, right? I mean,
before everybody's social security, but somewhere,
Exactly.
Well, social security numbers were meant to be a secured identifier.
Right, exactly.
That's just what happened, and a lot of people even use them as primary keys in databases. Great idea. So it's like, I remember back when I was at when I first computer job, they gave everybody an ID card for the computer lab. And the ID card was the magstripe, right? And we had a magstripe reader on our computers where we would lock people into the computer lab. And you could swipe the magstripe. As you swiped it, it typed in the person's social security number into a field in a database, and it would look them up and tell if they're an active student or whatever. But the fact that their social security number was not encrypted in any form on that ID card, and you could just swipe it and that was it. So that kind of got me thinking, they don't care about our data. Most places, they don't care about it until it costs them money. And when it starts costing people money, that's when they care about the data that's being leaked from them. And after like Cambridge Analytica and shit, and seeing how easy it is for some companies to get a lot of information on you, and like even like then there's sites that I subscribe to where I can just run a background report on anybody I fucking want. I pay like $40 a month. That's unlimited backgrounds. I can explore them the PDF. I can learn all about people. There was a dude who was selling me some edibles near my house where it's legal in Portland. And I was just curious about the guy because he seemed a little sketch on all the ran his background check, so his criminal record. It was interesting that you can do that kind of shit nowadays. Like I was like, oh, that guy fucking jumped the turnstile or whatever, the equivalent in my area, and it's interesting that there's so much data on people. So I think the problem is it's not indexed or aggregated in any meaningful way yet. But as the internet grows and the storage capabilities and the ability to search fast grows, I think there's going to be so much of a metric shit ton of data about everybody out there that they'll probably just start having central data warehouses where you can just do a request on somebody and get like everything, every Facebook post, every Twitter thing they've ever done, everything, not just online stuff, but like you probably be able to get like not just address history, which is already easy to get, phone number history easy to get, but like data you wouldn't think like, oh, they might be cheating on their wife based on their text messaging history, or like all sorts of shit that could be drawn through conclusions that AI and machine learning can make.
One of the, I guess my fantasy, apocalyptic scenarios, if you will, is that AI gets to a point that it starts taking this data and thinking it is that person that they've aggregated all the info together. And we're in the age of deep fakes and voice, basically copying somebody's voice that they can do all that.
Deep fakes. So I want to talk about this. There was a hack recently, more of a social engineering thing, but they were able to convince people in a company that the CEO had called as a common scam, go out, get me gift cards type thing. But the way they executed this attack was using a deepfake voice. And the amount of work that goes into deepfaking somebody's voice so you can do real-time communication is astounding. Because you can easily deepfake somebody's voice from samples if you have enough of them, but that will only get you a voice that you can use to you type out a thing, and then it will say that. But to be able to have it where you can say something and in real time, it wear like a face, like wearing a deepfake, wearing a face, or using somebody else's voice through some simulation. That's an astounding amount of work for a threat actor to have access to. I don't have access to shit like that, and I worked for like Fortune 500s. They didn't have access to that shit either. It's like,
it might be just early. It's still sci-fi right now, but science fiction today might be science fiction tomorrow.
It always is. Like Asimov proved that. I think he was talking about satellites in a book before satellites were a thing. And it's just fascinating to see how we step from science fiction to science fact. Even like the Star Trek communicators they had, where they, it's like a cell phone, like that was a flip phone before flip phones were a thing. And it was in the 60s. They didn't have them back then, but like the idea was there. And then people, I think, when they see a science fiction thing that's really cool and fascinates the shit out of them, they're like, I could fucking build that, and they do. So I think science fiction influences science, reality. And I think it's kind of like a cyclical thing, like they feed off each other.
Yeah, because the science today is like the feed, to be able to build, future visions. Start from somewhere.
Yeah.
But it's a little, So we're quite many topics. But,
Yeah. So I think we'll hit a good ending point. So I'm gonna get back.
We're all wrapped.
But thank you all for joining us for the Crypto Shit Show.
Yes.
I am Frank.
I'm Jason.
Jason. That's Autumn over there. You probably know her from my other shit if you watch anything I do.
Sorry.
Yeah, you is. Say hi. We're gonna cut out, and thank you again for watching. Have a great night. Stay safe. Stay warm. Don't do anything stupid.
How you get down there?